Yes, you are dead. Dropping that thing into a volcano should have done the deed, the taller and much larger figure said with a laugh as he stepped through the ethereal portal onto the cobblestones of a deserted back alley. Slow it down some, maybe. Reduce it in strength a minimal amount, yes. Kill it, no. There is no known way to kill a demon stalker short of direct divine intervention, replied the shorter and much smaller figure. Then we must have lost it travelling through the ethereal badlands. And that essence storm you kicked off has got to have done something, stated the taller man, somewhat unsure now. No, we did not lose it, we just put some distance between us. The storm bought us about 5 minutes or so more delay, most likely less. We are going to separate here, Pandarian. You are going to find Damien and Kellyan and meet me at the waterfront in an hour, while I lead this thing on a merry chase through. The area of the alley was suddenly engulfed in bright bluish-white light, very rapidly followed by a loud, sharp crack of thunder as the light rapidly faded. The small man reached out and touched the larger man, who instantly shot rapidly up into the air, fading from sight as an invisibility contingency spell took effect. Even before the large man had reached half his height about the ground, the smaller man spun about, while he pulled a throwing dagger from his left forearm sheath and threw it in the exact direction of the thunder. He then chanted a few syllables of an arcane spell and disappeared in a pop as the air rushed in to fill the void the man had just vacated. The dagger flew through the air, only to stick into a black, short, inhumanly thin humanoid-like figure. The blackness of the being was so complete that it was impossible to look at. It was as if the outline of the being was actually cut out of reality, revealing the absolute blackness beyond. It turned about as if scanning the area for something. Then it shimmered a bit as if seen through hot wavering air, and disappeared once again into the ethereal, the dagger still embedded in its chest right where its heart would be if it had one. Somewhere outside of time. When did it all start? The voice asked. By placing the words directly in the Grey's mind, the effect was so perfect that he thought he had in fact heard them being spoken. I don't really know. I think it was just after the fall of Valencia, but before the long night got underway. That would make it the winter of 5476 old calendar. Who are you, anyway? Asked Grey. You know the answer to that question, responded the voice. From the heavy quality of the voice, Grey knew that he, as in the presence of, or to be more exact, talking with a high lord, or if you prefer a god, even if the voice did sound exactly like his own. Just looking for confirmation. So I am dead, then? Asked Grey. Yes! Very dead! Answered the voice. Why do you sound like me? Asked Grey. You know the answer to that question too, answered the voice. Just making sure I am dead, explained Grey. Yes, you are dead, confirmed the voice with a slight sigh, which Grey correctly interpreted as a growing impatience with his unwillingness to accept the obvious. Why do I seem to be floating as a sea of greyness? Where are you? Where are the halls of judgment? Where is my soul body? Grey asked, each question growing angrier with each one. Calm yourself. You can think of this as a place of transition. I am all around you. I am the greyness. As you have not yet arrived at the halls, you do not need a body yet, answered the voice. How long have I been dead? Asked Grey, his anger replaced with curiosity. Time is not a concept that applies here. There is only now. It is always now. No past, no present, no future, answered the voice. Wonderful. How long am I going to be here? No, don't tell me. I have been and will always be here. Right? Grey asked with a soft laugh. No, you will be arriving at the halls in a very short period of subjective time, replied the voice. Can we just sort of bypass them? I am not really looking forward to what is to come, and I would really prefer to just avoid the whole experience if I can, asked Grey, wanting to avoid the mental and emotional anguish that comes with judgment. Yes, if you wish you can avoid the halls. The result would be non-existence for you, though, answered the voice with a playful laugh. Oh, in that case I guess being judged is not all that bad. giving the alternative. "So, are you going to answer my question? Why am I here and not in the halls of judgment?" asked Grey, trying to bring the voice back to the question. "No, there will be time enough for that later. At this time you do not have a need to know, I am sure you understand. Suffice it to say that you are here because it is necessary for you to be here." "Besides, we have arrived," answered the voice. Instantly there was sound, weight, a blur of surroundings, and Grey was standing before 3 large empty white thrones, all sitting on a raised dais of highly polished black stone. Though the voice was silent, Grey knew that it was still present. Then, as if they were always there, the 3 judges were there sitting on their thrones, Mulunu with her sword to Kolos, Sorkamor with its all-seeing orb, and blind Kos with his red staff. They were dressed in simple white robes, each was barefoot, except for Sorkamor whose hooves were unshod. Grey was dressed in the black robes of the recently dead, wearing a pair of well-cared-for commando boots. Grey examined himself, and as far as he could tell his soul body was an exact copy of his living body, old scars and all, as it was at the exact instant of his death, including the black obsidian dagger that was embedded in his chest and heart, the last of which Grey was not aware of at all. The 3 judges just stared at a point just past Grey, when they should have already started telling him that he was in halls of judgment, and his past life was to be judged to determine the fate of my soul. But they just sat there, looking not quite at him, almost as if they were staring into, through, and somehow past him to someone or something else. The Lady Destiny. They are in fact looking directly at a limited manifestation of myself that they are able to perceive. Whom am I, you ask? I have many names: Lady Luck, the Hand of Fate, that insane bitch, and some other less flattering titles, but I prefer Lady Destiny. And for the record, I do not work for, nor am I associated with, the Fates. Now pay attention to this next part. It is very important to what is destined to happen. The voice said, "This one is mine. You need not bother yourselves. I hereby claim him." "We are the judges. We decide his fate," bellowed Sorkamor. "You have no claim on him whatsoever. He is mine. I hereby claim him," calmly replied the voice. "He must be judged. The fate of his soul must be determined," screeched Mulunu with her crow-like voice. "There is nothing to judge with regard to this one. Fate was never, nor will it ever be, an issue in his life. His entire existence to this point was predetermined. He is mine, and I hereby claim him," answered the voice. "He lived. He existed. He has a soul. He must be judged. The fate of his soul must be determined," reasoned Kos. "I have said that he is mine, and I claim him. There is no need to judge his life as it was under my direction. There is no need to determine his soul's fate, as I already have determined what it is to be," stated the voice. "He is the one, then?" asked Kos. "Yes," responded the voice. "Then we will not interfere. You may claim him, but he must remain here in the halls of judgment, and he must be judged, but you may determine his fate," stated Sorkamor. "Very well, it is agreed that you may judge him, but his fate is mine to impose," agreed the voice before its presence left the halls of judgment. At a judgment station in the halls of judgment. The newly arrived, recently dead being encased in his soul body, once known as Grey, sits at a writing desk. "Life takes on a completely different meaning when one is dead," wrote Grey on a simple scroll, one lacking any embellishments at all. And don't think for one second that the irony of that statement has escaped me. After all, when you are living, you are experiencing the moment, thinking about the future, or remembering the past. After you are dead, all you can do is relive your past life, without any changes. No editing, no rewriting, just the life you're lived, as you lived it. Of course, the purpose of this is to be judged, by the powers that be, or the lords of judgment if you prefer, wrote Grey, with the last part looking very much as if it wrote itself with little or no direction from Grey. Grey stopped writing at that point, and just stared at the quill, and then at what he had just finished writing. Putting the quill back onto its holder, he looked up at the 3 judges and said, I thought I was supposed to be writing this. What was that last bit all about? I am specifically referring to the parts written in uppercase. Are you responsible for that? Because I certainly had no intention of writing that. You are required to show the proper respect at all times, answered Sorkamore, pointing at Grey with his orb and staring at him with his 3 eyes. I'll keep that in mind, he replied with just a hint of sarcasm. While this is supposed to be about my life, be warned that this work is not entirely my own. There will be occasional editorial changes, Grey wrote with some satisfaction. Perhaps I should introduce myself. Sebastian Greylan at your service, Valencian by birth, Natalian by choice, professional adventurer by trade, as in a person who gains wealth by questionable means. Grey threw the quill in the general direction of the holder and looked up at the judges, and with a great deal of effort calmly asked, "What's that about? And what does it have to do with being respectful?" "You are also required to tell the absolute truth," replied Koss, pointing the red staff of truth at Grey, not bothering to turn his blind eyes to look at him. Not saying anything in return, Grey picked up the quill and continued to write. "Now you see what I mean. The powers only allow for the truth, all the truth, and nothing but the absolute truth, not taking the situation or personal point of view into any consideration." Grey wrote, taking obvious great pains when writing the powers, to indicate the respect he did not feel. "Anyway, as I was saying, for most of my professional career, I have resided in the city of Belisarius, the capital of Natal, a prosperous metropolis of slightly over 500,000 humans, elves, dwarves, and other beings." "But you are getting ahead of yourself," interjected Mulunu. "There, the powers that be, did it again. No editing. All the truth, nothing but the truth. Now they are dictating how I have to tell the story of my life. Gods, it makes me sick. And another thing, the way the powers that be and gods always appears in capitals, it's annoying." Mulunu pointed her sword to Kolos at Grey, who was lifted from his chair and slammed into the immense white pillar that stood 10 feet behind the desk. There he writhed in intense pain as blue flame danced about his body. He could not scream, because his total consciousness was involved in experiencing the pain. Don't ever describe the powers that be as annoying or question the wisdom of the powers that be. The results are unpleasant and extremely painful. Grey's third law. After some time had passed, the flames abated, leaving his clothing, body, and obsidian dagger undamaged. He fell to the floor, and he just laid there for an eternal moment. Then he slowly climbed to his feet, using the pillar as support, slowly walked back to his desk, set his chair upright and sat down. "You probably should avoid deliberately annoying them. They are already harbouring resentment because I have involved myself in your judgment," said the voice. "I thought they were supposed to be completely impartial, and besides, I had nothing to do with your becoming involved," said Grey. "Their carefully ordered existence has been disrupted, and they are somewhat on edge because of it. So I repeat my suggestion that you don't annoy them," replied the voice. "I will take that under advisement, which brings up the question, why did you involve yourself in my judgment, in the first place?" Grey asked. But the voice had already removed its presence from the halls of judgment. Picking the quill up from the floor, he dipped the point in the inkwell and started to write again. "Well, to start at the beginning, I was born in the city of Narvia in the province of Narvia, in the then Republic of Valencia, during the season of rains, in the year 5476 CE, Common Era. My parents, Soltrus and Cathia Gravi, were silversmiths, with a charter from the governor of Narvia. Father was also an officer in the town militia, and mother was something of a hedge wizard, with a rank of third circle. We lived in a 14-room fashionable townhouse in the Crafters' Quarter, somewhere near the Fountain of the Lady. As it happened, I was born with a good degree of the talent, that is, I could sense the essence and manipulate its flow, an occurrence that was not uncommon. What was very unusual was that I could do so even with significant amounts of cold iron on or surrounding me, a fact that my parents were soon to discover. The ability to use magic begins even before birth, but the living aura of the mother prevents any manipulation of the essence by the unborn baby. But once they are born, the baby's aura begins to interact with the essence flow. It is customary to load the child with iron wrist and ankle bands to prevent this from occurring. The iron acts to dampen the aura effects on the essence and the essence's effects on the child. In my case, this was not the effect. In fact, the iron loading had no effect at all. Even totally encased in an iron crib, I was still able to cause essence effects, or magic if you will. It was necessary for me to be kept in dispel magic area effects. And as I grew older, the stronger the dispel magic spells had to be. Luckily, about the time I left infancy and entered childhood, I could be taught how to control my aura and its effects on the essence. It wasn't until I entered puberty that they discovered the reason for my ability. I was able to sense the natural ambient mana field that is created by all living things. The iron did dampen my aura's effects on the essence. It did not have any effect on the mana field, and my aura could manipulate it just fine. This detail is becoming exhaustive, and quite frankly a little boring, so if you don't mind, I think I will just skip it and go on to the more interesting parts, Gray said to the 3 judges sitting on their thrones. If that is how you choose to be judged, so shall it be. You will be judged by how you perceived yourself to have been, and you will be condemned by your own standards, replied Kos. What do you mean condemned? I thought my fate was already determined, Gray started to say, before he was interrupted by Kos. You are already condemned, by your actions as you lived them, by your deeds as you performed them, by your thoughts as you conceived them. Judgment is to determine whether you will be allowed to ascend or be returned to live another life. Oh, thank you for clearing that up for me, responded Gray. Ignoring the opinion of the judges, Gray closed his eyes and thought about one of the more interesting parts, his past life. City of Belisarius, during the Second Baton War. It was night, it was raining, there was an occasional flash of lighting, followed by booming thunder a few moments later. Just about perfect conditions. I'm telling you, Bastian, you're putting on weight, said Pandarian. No, Carl. My clothes are wet, the equipment in this damned pack is heavy, and there is the leather armour I have on, replied Bastian. What armour? You did not say anything about armour. Why wasn't I told? Why was I not issued armour? Carl, will you shut up, compose yourself and relax, but keep a tight grip on that rope. I did not tell you about the armour as you are not going to need any. I am wearing armour in case I miss a trap and something nasty gets launched at me. Now if you will continue to lower me till I give the signal. What can I say about Carl Pandarian? He is the 6th son of a Narvian middle-class family with very little money, certainly not enough to buy military or civilian officer rank, or provide much for political advancement. He stands roughly 2 standards tall, or if you prefer about 7 feet 4 inches tall, with a heavy build, short black hair, dark eyes and olive complexion. He may look like a small giant, but he moves like a dancer, graceful and fluid. The first time I saw him was in a line of new recruits for the 3rd Legion. I had just completed my recovery from a mission gone bad, and I was looking for someone very much like him, or to be more exact, someone exactly like him. All right, I was looking for him. Bastian made a series of small hand gestures that signified, "Stop, I'm there. Give me a few seconds to secure my harness, then join me." Quickly, he coupled a strap that connected his black body harness to the square wrought iron bars that protected the window. He then disconnected his harness from the rope that went up to the Pandarian on the roof. Taking a small spring-driven bit, he drilled a hole through the wooden frame. The bit was then withdrawn. Moments later, Carl joined Sebastian, hanging upside down above the window and almost head-to-head with him. "Why is it, my friend, that I'm always the one who gets to enjoy hanging upside down, with the blood rushing to my head?" asked Carl. "Because you are not able to sense the flow, even standing in a full-blown essence storm, besides you're a much bigger and heavier. I couldn't possibly lower you down with you carrying all the equipment. Now be quiet and let me get on with this." Sebastian pushed a narrow tube into the hole he had just drilled, As it penetrated through to the other side of the window, he attached a lens-like device he took from one of the small pockets that populated his vest. Looking through the lens, slowly refocusing his eye, he began to see colours framing the inside of the window, blanketing the glass, and the walls, floor and ceiling of the occupied room beyond, mostly shades of red, but with clear bands of green around the interior of the window. Taking a moment to examine the occupant of the room, Sebastian suddenly withdraws the tube, reaching quickly for the knife attached by belted sheath to his thigh. He reached up and cut the rope holding Carl, and then the strap holding him to the iron grate. The two fall momentarily, then hover and disappear as their voices fade out. "Damn, I hate when you do that," cursed Pandarian. "Would you rather be caught, imprisoned, put to the question by the guard, then hung out to die a slow lingerie?" Above the river that bisected the city of Belisarius, a heavy backpack appeared from nowhere and plunged into the black cold water, soon followed by black leather harnesses, leather breast and backplate armour. And a short time later, 2 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, 2 pairs of soft boots, and other assorted clothing, all in black. All this as the rain continued to fall, the lightning flash and the thunder roar. "How long do you figure till they find the pack, Bastian?" asked Pandarian, as he stepped naked through the ethereal portal into a tastefully appointed room with no windows, or even a door for that matter. "Not before first light, and most likely not before the storm's end. I would guess around midday. If they have not started to at least look by then, we will have to try a more direct approach," replied Bastian as he too stepped fully clothed from the portal as it closed. The larger man nodded his head as he reached for robe and put it on. The smaller one, moving over to one of the 2 leather-covered padded chairs by a fire. Sitting down, he gestures in the general direction of a chest. "Pandarion, would you get out the good general's dossier and read it? I want your opinion on something," asked Bastian. "Sure. Do you want a brandy or anything else while I'm up?" "No, not at the moment. I just want to think this through. There is something flittering around in the back of my mind that is bothering me about this mission. A more than vague sense that there is something not right about the details." Sitting down with the scroll he had retrieved from the chest and a glass of brandy, Pandarian joined Bastian at the fire. Pandarian reads and absently sip his brandy. Bastian sat motionless, eyes closed, thinking. Omar Raphael Pentala, Ben David, Prince of the Baitor, Caliph of Samarkand, commanding general of the Battlefield Expeditionary Force occupying the Natalian capital city Belisarius, was, by all reports, one very nasty bastard. His file portrayed him as evil incarnate, the great devil himself, walking the world plain in human form. From what I have seen of him in action so far, his biographer was being kind. The previous afternoon we witnessed him publicly order the impaling of 27 former high-ranking nobles and leaders of the city. He then had each brushed down with pitch and set afire. Their crime? They refused to sign a document proclaiming the general, protector of the city. Besides him being a complete bastard, what do you want my opinion on, Bastian? Tell me, my friend, from reading his file, what do you think his sexual preference is? Well, he is married, has 3 wives, 23 children, 8 grandchildren, and a harem of 30 or so concubines and slaves. I would say he preferred women. Why do you ask? The general in that room last night was a eunuch, his aura and spirit projection were those of the general, and no, they were not illusionary or a facade. So tell me, Bastian, why would a prince, caliph and general of the Baitor allow himself to be made a eunuch? He wouldn't. He could not hold any of those titles if he were. Baton laws are very specific on that. He is either a duplicate, set out to masquerade as the general, or there is something very wrong here. That dossier is very complete. I know. I complied most of it. The man on the other side of that window was Ben David. I have no doubt of that at all. It would take direct divine intervention to produce a duplicate that perfect, or some very powerful spell on the order of a divine wish, or someone who had complete mastery of transmutation magic. Even then there would be traces. We need to get a much closer look at the general. How close? Asked Pandarian with a wary voice. Close enough to get some blood, skin or hair, all three would be better, replied the small man with a grin. You must start at the beginning if you are to be correctly judged, stated Sorkamore. What does it matter as long as I get it all down? I do not see how the order my life is recalled is relevant, as long as the information is complete. Do not ever argue with the powers that be, or give your opinion to the powers that be. The results are unpleasant and extremely painful. Gray's second law. You really should avoid confronting the Lord of Judgment. It will accomplish exactly nothing, and it is very painful, stated the voice. You have returned. Can you now tell me just what is going on, or do I still not have a need to know? The agreement with the Lords of Judgment was that you would be judged and I would determine your fate. Beyond that, it is not necessary for you to know or understand what is going on. The reason for this is simple. What you do not know, you cannot reveal to the Lords of Judgment, answered the voice. You expect me to recall my entire life so I can be judged and have my already sealed fate determined. That is ridiculous. Why should I go through that entire exercise for no apparent reason? Argued Gray. The judges are seeking answers. They have insisted you be judged in the hopes of finding those answers. I have agreed to this because you do not have the answers that they seek. The process is not ridiculous. They have agreed that I will determine your fate, so it is not a wasted effort on your part. The fastest way for you to get through this is to answer the question I originally asked you. When did it all start? When did it all start? Repeated Gray. After the fall of Valencia, on a beach of Talion Bay, before the long night. Bruin. Bruin. Here comes another one, cried the leather and fur-clad barbarian standing on a grass-covered rock outcrop overlooking the bay. You lot, get away from the shares or I will gut you where you stand, Braun ordered, directing his gaze to several men who were picking over the loot already taken from the 7 dead bodies that recently arrived on the beach. Grenfot, he still got some fight in him. Let him be. By the time he finishes fighting the outtide and makes sure he'll have no fight left, growled the red-haired chieftain. Yeah, Bruin, let the sea take the fight out of him. That's right smart, Grenfot replied in a somewhat subservient tone. So that was what waited for me on shore. 17 or so generic barbs, with a leader who could do some thinking when it suited him, and a boot-licking toady named Grenfot. Wonderful. Let the sea fight him indeed, with darkness approaching. The deep monsters will be coming up to the surface to feed. Any surface activity such as 10 barbs splashing about in the water would certainly attract some to the shore. There's not a vin low. Damn, nothing. The continuums must be completely foobar, cursed the half-drown, figure clinging to the fragment of ship's wooden deck. So, no high magic. I will have to make do with hedge spells. What do I have for sympathies? Good a bit of burnt wood. I will be able to work fire. Sea foam? Excellent. I can work air. The sea water, of course. Fresh water in my flask, I can work water. Gulls dropping? Good. Some spittle. Add the charcoal. Carefully add the sea foam. Good. Now focus. Reach out. Feel the mana. Gather it. Form it. Feel. There. With a small surge of power, the carefully constructed pile of components flashed and was gone. The figure slumped back down onto the deck, obviously weakened by the effort. Now focus. Gather the mana. Slowly. Let it flow evenly. Slow. Even. Gentle. Pressure. That's right, slowly increase the pressure. Slowly increase the flow. Build it slowly. There. Any more, and I will not be able to contain it. Now something to get them gathered up close and tight when I make my grand arrival on shore. The look of rich silks, gold and baubles. A bit of red silk from my cloak, a shaving of gold from a coin, some diamond dust from my wire saw, my ruby ring that will add silver too. I spent some time getting everything together. I really hated to give up the ring, but it was either it or me. Good. Reach out, slowly now, gather the strands, weave the flow, careful, not to fat, another chain of gold there. Good. Now slowly, slowly, let the reality fade and the facade replace it. Where there was once the figure of a half-drowned lean figure, simply dressed in a dark uniform and red cloak, now rested a plump man, dressed in water-darkened red silken robes, chains of gold and silver hanging from his neck. With rings and other obvious signs of wealth proclaiming to all who could see, a rich fat merchant, and clutched in his arms held closely to his chest, a modestly large, richly decorated money chest. Brawn, it's a merchant, a rich fat one, silks, gold chains, rings, gems, and a big money chest like they sometimes have at the trading posts, cried out Grenfo. All the men relaxing on the beach by the various fires immediately stopped everything they were doing and looked out to sea, trying to spot the merchant. There, one called out, "He is a fat one all right, as rich as I have seen 'em," laughed the one dressed only in leather kilt and boots, his chest bare to the cool evening air. Several of them rushed out into the water, trying to be the first to make their way to the riches. "What do you camp dogs think you're going? Get back here or I'll slit your throats," yelled Brawn, as he pushed his way through the men gathered at the shore. Those who were in the water slowly came out, carefully avoiding getting too close to the big, bare fur-clad chieftain. "We'll just wait here when he gets on shore, then we'll see what we have," stated Brawn. As the makeshift raft was finally pushed to shore by the waves, the fat merchant proceeded to drag himself and his chest up onto the beach. The crowd of barbarians parted before him as they began to circle him. They are gathering nicely, a good tight grouping. Wait. For it. Stay, Yardy. Almost. Now. An unseen wave of power rippled almost tangibly through the gathered men, engulfing them, tendrils of power, reached out to the fires scattered about the beach. Each blazed high into the dark sky when it instantly used up all its fuel, the flames racing back along the tendrils toward the gathered men. And in a flash, they were all engulfed in flame. As the bright flash faded, 17 blackened stumps fell to the sand. Gone was the fat merchant on the sands of the beach. All that remained was the half-drowned man, in the dark blue uniform and torn red cloak, slumped unconscious on the shore. "Morella, he's waking up," the excited girl voiced in a whisper to the young woman who was tending a pot resting in the coals of a fire. "Good. Now tear me a good length of your underslip torula, bunch it up and put it in the cold water here in blue jug," replied Morella. "Make sure that the silk is completely submerged, then stir it gently." The young woman, dressed in a crudely repaired, mostly blue Nobel woman's travel dress, carefully poured the contents of the pot into a cracked, fine ceramic cup. Moving with near-perfect grace, marred only by a slight limp in her left leg, she brought the cup to the lips of the man who now rested under woolen covers on a makeshift bed. "Easy now. Drink this slowly, it is a little bitter, but it will help some with the burns," gently stated the young woman. "Bitter does not do this brew justice, lady. Tastes a little like Varen and maybe a pinch of Casol. A good herbal treatment for pain and burns, though." "Varen Casol Vilo," chanted the man, to no effect whatsoever. "The essence is gone. High spells will not function now. There is only the natural endowed power left. Even the gods are not responding to prayers. I cannot even cast the simplest heal spells. Luckily for you, I had some Varen bark and castle leaves that I could brew to help with the burns," calmly stated Morella, as she continued to slowly pour small amounts from the contents of the cup into the man's mouth. Young sounds like she is from the western provinces, and of the patrician class. Nice cool hands, firm but gentle. I must have gotten a bit of the flash, from the fire wind. Must concentrate, gather the mana, infuse it into to the brew. Slowly, infuse each sip, Viren for the pain, Casol for the burns. Morella gasped. "Your burns, they're healing. There has not been magic for Hexals, and you're healing. How were able to do that? It surely was not the brew." "No," rasped the voice of the man. "I caused the local mana field to infuse the brew, thereby enhancing the endowed power of the herbs you used. Your uniform, according to the insignia, you are a warrior mage, are you not? asked the Morella. Not exactly, but I am very tired. I am going to sleep now, whispered the man. His eyes closed, and his breathing indicated that he was rapidly going to sleep. No, my Lady Morella, I am not exactly a warrior mage. It would be more correct to call me an Imperial Commando. Not that there is much left of the Imperium, most of it having been consumed by ICBM's intercontinuum battle magics. I am even willing to bet that more than one god died during that last battle. He is very attractive. Is he not, Morella? Asked the servant girl. Yes, Tarula, he is, and he is also very evasive. No outright lies, of course, but he did not answer any of my questions, responded Morella. Yes, he did, Morella. I heard him. He answered them. Sorry, miss, I should not be questioning you. No, Tarula, you should. How else are you to learn if you do not question me? But he did not answer the question. He responded to the questions, but he did not answer them. For instance, how did he answer my first question? How were you able to do that? He said, I caused the local mana field to infuse the brew, thereby enhancing the endowed power of the herbs you used. Is that not an answer, Morella? He did say what he did, didn't he? No, Tarula. The answer he gave was meaningless because it was incomplete. How did he cause the local mana to infuse the brew? How does that action enhance the endowed power of the herbs? Oh, I see. His answer was incomplete. I understand now. He simply stated the results of his actions, but did not describe those actions at all. Very good, Tarula. Now explain his second answer. You asked, your uniform according to the insignia, you are a warrior mage, are you not? And he responded, not exactly, but I am very tired now. I am going to sleep. He corrected your conclusion about the insignia. No, that is incorrect. Sorry, Morella, but I do not know how he evaded your second question. It seems that he lied to you. That's all right, Tarula. He was very clever in his response. What he was saying was that being a warrior mage was not exactly what he is, but he provided no details about what he really was. Then he stated that he was tired, which was true and complete in its detail, and then he stated that he was going to sleep, neither of which was an answer to any of my questions. As well he knows my name, yours too. Well, we do not know anything about him other than he can cast spells when there is a complete absence of essence, and he is not exactly a warrior mage. But enough of that. Fetch the blue jug. The silk has been soaking long enough now. Tease out the long threads. We are going to have to sew some of the other's wounds if they are going to heal. Quietly now, don't wake the other one. In the dark there was a load thump followed by a metal on wood thud. Sorry, Morella, he is just too big. I don't think he's going to fit in there. I am afraid you are right, Casella. Let's lay him out here and we'll find some way to get some cover over him, said Morella. There were two women holding each end of the two poles of the crude stretcher on, which lay a large man, dressed in sea armour over a dark uniform, clutching a chest in his arms. He must be well over 2 standards tall and weighs at least 10 hog if he's a stone, complained one woman. He most likely would weight less without that chest and the armour, reasoned another. I wonder if he is as well built as the other one, laughing asked a third. Enough, Casella, you and Beatrice fetch some of the barbarian furs and drape them over these tent poles and create an overhang here to cover him until we can get him moved, ordered Morella. The rest of you can get back to work. We still have to get everything those thieves didn't take under cover before the rain starts. So, looking down at the large man, I wonder if you are also not exactly a warrior mage, like your friend, and what is so important about that chest that you will not let it go? Morella continued staring down at the long, heavily built man, wondering how she was going to get him out of his wet armour and clothes, especially when he was still clutching that chest too tightly. His name is Carlos Antonius Pandarian, but I am afraid proper introductions will have to wait until he is awake, said the other man standing in the doorway with a richly woven scarlet blanket wrapped about his upper chest and draping to the floor. You startled me. She gasped as she spun about to confront him. My most profound apologies, Lady Morella Natalia Taralis. I am afraid I have bad tidings to convey. Then moving his left hand up to cover his eyes, he continued, "Your father, Senator Volunturus Marcus Altinus, is dead," he said with no emotion or inflection to his voice. "Thank you, sir, for your connivance of such tragic news," she replied in the same emotionless tone, with her left hand also covering her eyes. "May his spirit shaped by his deeds in life please the Lord's, and may he pass beyond the cycles of life, to the rewards of heaven beyond." Moments later, after the death prayer to the Lords of Judgment that was intoned by both, she asked, "How do you know of his death?" she asked as she dropped her hand down to her side. "I served with him on the IES Victorious Griffin. I was the Imperial Liaison Officer to his staff. I know he is dead because we were in battle, and his duty station was the command deck, which took a direct hit from an elemental plasma strike. There were no survivors, Lady Morella." "That was a very concise report, sir. What is your name, and just who are you?" "My apologies again, Lady Morella. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Sebastian Tellanus Graylanus, Senior Tribune in His Majesty's Imperial Commandos. My friends call me Bastian, and because I am indebted to you, I would like very much for us to be friends." "My father spoke very highly of you, sir. He said that you were the first IPO he had ever met who was willing, even eager to get his hands dirty. His prior opinion was that all IPOs only grudgingly advocated on their assigned command's behalf, whereas you would most willing go and kick headquarters butt till you got what was needed. During these last few months, he was most grateful for your service and friendship." "I liked the Admiral too, Lady Morella. It was a great honour and joy to serve with him. As I said, Lady Morella, I am indebted to you for saving my life and that of my friend here. Now how may I be of service to you?" "How are you able to cast healing magic? You previously mentioned using the local mana field, but you failed to provide the specific details on how this is accomplished. Also, how were you able to cast elemental magic? These is no essence flow, nor as far as I can tell access to any of the inner or outer planes." Morella rapidly asked each question, stopping only when Bastian put up his hand to stop her. "Lady Morella, I know you have many questions and I will answer them as completely as I am able, but there is not sufficient time at the moment to do so. How long ago did I arrive here?" "You arrived yesterday at the 4th of dusk and it is now 2nd of night," replied Morella, somewhat annoyed. "About 10/10 ago then. How many people do you have here, and is that barb ship still anchored in the bay?" "There are 23 women myself, Tarula, you and your friend," replied Morella, now more puzzled than annoyed. "Get everyone to pack what they can carry, as much food and water as you have, and whatever other supplies you've got, and have everything on the beach nearest the ship within an sect. Soon, very soon, this beach is going to be hit by a large wave, and we do not want to be here when it does." "What are you talking about? What sort of wave? How do you know this? I will do no such thing until I get some answers," she angrily said, while visibly working to keep herself from yelling. "You will do as I say or I will render you unconscious, put you on the ship and leave everyone else here. Do you understand? There is no time for lengthy explanations now. Just do as you are told and I will explain everything as soon as I can. Now move," he barked. Morella stared at him for an instant. They ran out of the tent, yelling to everyone, "Get packed, take only what you can carry, hurry. Tarula, get the supplies, food and water and start taking them down to the beach nearest the ship. Hurry, we do not have much time." In the tent, Bastian briefly looked around for his clothes, but did not see them. Stopping to kick Darian's right shoulder, he said, "Wake up, you don't have time to sleep right now." Darian remained motionless, not responding in any way to the kick or the statement. "Damn!" exclaimed Bastian. "Sorry, my friend, but you are just going to have to wait. I have to see to the ship and these people, so don't go anywhere." Stepping out into the night, he found his clothes hanging on some lines drying. Finding them still wet, he nevertheless gathered them up and re-entered the tent, dropping the blanket as he did so. A short time later, Bastian once again emerged from the tent, fully clothed, and began running toward the ship. Looks like it will be big enough to hold everyone, maybe a little tight, but it will have to suffice. Bastian comes to a stop, and half to himself says, I am never going to get that thing off the beach by myself. Touring around, he runs back to the tent, and his friend lying just where he had left him. Going to his knees as he reaches the still form of his friend, he closes his eyes. Focus, feels for the mana, gather it, have it flow around Darian, easy now, easy. There. Opening his eyes, he examines the now visible aura of his friend. Essence shock. Well, that explains why he is not awake, and stiff as a plank. Now how do I bleed off the essence without access to the essence flows? I wonder. Maybe. Bastian, once again, reaches out to the mana field and gathers the mana around his friend. When he judges that he has a sufficient amount, he slowly fuses it to the trapped essence within Darian's aura. When he has all of the essence fused, he causes it to flow from his friend to himself, where he stores it within in his own aura. Once again, he checks Darian's aura, searching for any other abnormalities. As he is doing this, Darian awakes. Are you causing that glow? If so, would you tone it down? I seem to have a hangover, spoke Pandarian, barely over a whisper. Good, you're awake. We have a lot to do, and very little time to get it all done. Pull yourself together, then meet me down on the beach by the ship, Bastian said, taking the chest from his friend's hands as he got up. I once again ran down to the shore near the ship, looking for Morella as I went. Darian continues to lie there for a moment or two, then slowly begins the preparations necessary to stand up when one has the demon of all hangovers. First, he rolls to his side, rests a moment, then gathering his arms and knees under him as he continues the roll till he is on his hand and knees, all the while trying to keep his head steady as possible. With a very quiet moan, he gathers himself for the big push, so that he will be just on his knees. Reaching out with his right arm, he grabs the nearest tent pole to steady himself, as he slowly raises his head and opens his eyes for the first time. He closes them again as the faint light of the camp at night stabs into his eyes. Supporting himself with the pole, he finally stands, wavering a bit, but he soon steadies. Opening his eyes once again, to very narrow slits, he accustoms himself to the light and looks around. Spotting the beach, he searches for the ship in the darkness. Spotting it in the reddish light of a pair of torches, he slowly begins to walk toward it, stopping to steady himself with the tent pole he still held in his hand. As I run to the ship, various women ran up and down the beach, carrying crude bundles down to the shore, then running back up the beach to the camp to get more. They ranged in age from late girlhood to early matron. All were bruised and battered, mostly I presumed, from the treatment they received at the hands of the barbs. I was not to learn until later that all of them had been raped repeatedly. Many of them had watched their husbands and sons get beaten and killed. They were then marched from their homes to this place as slaves, for the intended purpose of getting them to markets where they could be sold. It was a raid orchestrated by the Batorna to disrupt our colonies and cause us to divert forces from the front lines to protect our citizens. As a plan, it had some merit. If the war had been a protracted one, it would have succeeded in diverting some forces, not enough to really matter in the long run, but enough to have had an effect on the early days of the war. But it was not a long war. It barely lasted 4 days. The lands of the Batorn were now all wasteland, not a living thing remained, all having been consumed by strategic strikes of elemental chaos. As for Valencia, the entire island continent had been devastated by star rocks dropped from the void, causing the bedrock to fracture and break, creating the earthquakes which caused the very land to break and sink, allowing the sea to rush in. It was the tsunami from that event I was attempting to escape. There was no sense rushing inland. We could not get far enough, fast enough to have any real hope of survival. No, our only hope was to get out far enough out to sea that the wave front would pass us as a raising swell of water. That meant we would have to get out past the shallows and into deep water very soon. "This is the last of the food and water, Morella, and I have brought your things from the tent," said Tarula as she piled 2 bundles on the pile on the beach. "Thank Tarula. Quickly now go to the others and have them finish quickly. They will have the ship floating free shortly, and I am sure they will want to get everything loaded," replied Morella as she sat on a crate watching the two men working to push the ship into deeper water. Tarula ran off to gather the other woman as Morella continued to stare out at the ship. Her mind in obvious turmoil, her hands and fingers twitching would half form the gestures necessary to cast spells. Then she would clench her into tight fists. "That woman continues to stare at us, Bastian. I think she is very angry and it is just a matter of time till she explodes," said Darian. "Has he continued to muscle the ship into deeper water?" "You are most likely right, Carl, about her being angry. But she will not unleash that inner fury. She is the Admiral's daughter. She knows command orders when she hears them, and she will not question them, at least until the emergency has passed," replied Bastian. The ship glided a short distance as the keel came free of the sand, and the ship floated unhindered in the water. "Bastian, I want you to get the women to form a cargo line, with you at the ship to throw things up. When we have loaded as much as we can carry, you can then start handing up the women. Tell Lady Morella food, water, supplies and personal belongings in that order. When I say enough, get the women to the side of the ship so they can be loaded." Without a further word, Bastian climbed a rope up the side of the ship and onto its deck. Darian waded through the water to shore, and the waiting Lady Morella, who stood up as he approached her. "Lady, he wants you to get the other ladies together, have them form a cargo line to the ship. You are to pass up food, water, supplies and personal effects in that order. When he says enough, all the women are to come to the side of the ship so they can be boarded," repeated Darian to Morella, as she stood calmly without any expression. "Thank you, Centurion. I will have the woman form up and we will start as soon as I explain what has to be done," she replied. "Ladies, gather around quickly now, we don't have much time." I watch as Lady Morella instructed the women in the details of forming a cargo line, while Darian was using the time to move the ship so that it was portside to shore. Shortly thereafter, the cargo began to arrive, and with the exception of the water, I flung it to the centre of the ship. I had Darian hand up one of the women so she could take the water jugs and pour them into the ship's barrels. Soon Darian handed the first of the women up to me, and I got them to sit on the oar benches. Finally, less than 2/10 after we started, Lady Morella was handed up to me. With a smile I gave her instructions on how to keep the bow of the ship pointed in the direction out of the bay, and I sent her to the steering oar at the stern. There was still fire in her eyes. "Get us moving, Darian, then get on board. I will be calling for a wind shortly." "Aye, aye, sir," replied Darian with a laugh. I reached for the essence I collected from Darian, and melded it with my aura, which grew in volume. All the while I shaped my rapidly growing aura so that it formed a rough funnel to the stern of the ship, sitting just above the water and angling out on each side of the ship and high into the air. When I estimated that I had enough air volume contained, I began to cause the contained mana field to move the air toward the sails, and the ship slowly moved forward. Once the flow of air began to increase and the ship moved forward, I called out to Darian to get on board, but he was already reaching over the port side and lifting himself aboard. As we cleared the shore, I slowly increased the flow of air again and we were sailing. I had Darian go and take the steering oar and told him to send Lady Morella to me. Around me the ladies were resting, most exhausted by the labour it took to get us this far. Tarula and another women were going from bench to bench with a water bucket and a bundle of food. "Lady Morella Natalia Taralis reporting as ordered, sir," snapped Morella in one of the best midshipman presentations I had ever seen. "Thank you, Lady Morella. If you will sit here, I will start that explanation as I promised." "Sir?" "Yes, sir." "I prefer to stand, sir." "You will have to stand to one side then, as I must keep an eye on my aura if I am to continue to generate wind," I said with my number 2 half-smile with an added twinkle to my eyes. She looked startled for an instant, then her face once again became expressionless. The fire was still very much in her eyes, but she moved to starboard and sat on the crate I had placed there. "How are you creating the wind?" She looked to the stern and refocused her eyes to perceive my aura and the power it contained. "That is amazing. All that is your aura. How did you get it to be so big?" Some would say it is a natural talent given the size of my ego. But in reality, when you brought Darian to the tent, he was in essence shock. I drained it off and stored it until I used it to expand my aura. I am currently using my expanded aura to manipulate the mana field to move the air within that large volume toward the ship. In effect, I am creating wind. Can you heal with this magic? Several of the ladies have injuries that need to be tended to. Yes, but there is no time for that now. We must get to deep water as soon as we can. When everyone is settled, I am going to increase the airflow as much as I can, so I get as much speed as I can out of this hall. Why, what is the hurry? Why all the rush? As I told you before, Lady Morella, a very large wave is headed this way. A tsunami, in fact. We have less than a hexile to get this vessel into deep water before it arrives, where we can safely ride out the wave front before it actually begins to crest. What is going on? How do you know this? Those details are going to have to wait, Lady Morella. I now need you to get each of the ladies secured to their benches. There are ropes for that use attached to each bench, yourself included. When we are safe, I will answer all your questions as completely as I can. She nodded her head, and with a slight smile and less fire in her eyes, she went about her assigned duty. I gathered my will and refocused on my aura and the enclosed mana field. The airflow increased, and the ship lurched forward once again with added speed. Soon we were clear of the bay and its calm waters, and out into the sea with its waves and winds. I was able to take advantage of the natural winds and reduce the volume of my aura, and conserve the essence, as less than a third remained. We ran before the winds, making a straight course towards deep water. The ship creaked, occasionally groaned, but it held up to the pounding it took, cutting through the waves at speed. I was exhausted by the time we got out into the deep water, but I was going to put as much distance as I could from shore before I allowed myself the sleep my body and mind craved. I felt the ship raise up as the wavefront passed by. We had been at sea for just over the hexile I told Morella we had, when it happened. I could tell by the looks in their eyes that Darian and Morella also felt it. The others were mostly asleep. I reconcentrated the remaining essence within my aura and felt it shrink to its normal bounds. My will drained, and I was suddenly very tired and completely exhausted by the effort. Interlude. Halls of Judgment. It was you who either prevented the essence shock that should have hit me as we crashed through the ethereal boundary, or you caused my recovery, asked Grey. Yes, you were destined to recover, replied the voice. You also healed most of the heat damage I suffered from the firewind. Yes, you were destined to heal rapidly, replied the voice with a bemused lilt. You also kept me alive after that mission went bad, and made sure I got to the pickup point. Yes, you were destined to not be extremely injured, and you were destined to avoid all the patrols out to prevent your escape, answered the voice with a quiet laugh. You also dropped Darian right on my lap. Yes, you were destined to be reunited quickly, the voice quipped with a happy giggle. Why? It was destined to be, laughed the voice. All right already. I figured out that you're Lady Destiny some time ago. Could you be a little less sarcastic and a little more specific? Asked Grey. Very well, fate arranged for your being, and I was set to oversee your destiny, replied Lady Destiny, with a new voice that had seduction dripping from it. Funny, he replied with a degree of his own brand of sarcasm. That's like saying that you can see fire because of the flame. Could you provide some useful detail? No, as your fate is yet to be determined, I cannot provide more detail. What I can say is that you exist, T because you were fate to do so. With the end of the spell, the ship slowed, till the natural winds took over, moving the ship through the water. Darion watched Bastian as he slumped forward and fall to his left side as he collapsed. He tied off the steering oar and went to the huddled form, and stretched him out and rolled him onto his back, while he checked his pulse and breathing, making sure he wasn't in shock. Returning to the stern, he untied the oar and brought the ship about so that it was running before the wind. From her oar bench she watched Bastian's collapse, but before she could finish untying herself, the large man had already reached his friend and made him comfortable. How can someone so big move so gracefully? He almost glided over the deck. No waist motion at all. He is like a dancer, Morella thought to herself. I wonder if he can do magic too. He is a commando, but he is so obviously a warrior, and he is wearing armour. Bastian was wearing armour too when he called the fire and when he healed himself. How can he cast spells, dressed in metal and with no essence flow? Going to the cooking station, she gathered the remains of the stew in a wooden sailor's bowl, and the remaining loaf. She then made her way unsteady to the stern, and managed to arrive without incident. Can you tie off the oar again so you can eat, Lord Carlos? I have stew and loaf if you are interested. Thank you, milady, you are very kind, but I am not a lord. I am the third son of a landholder, replied Darian as he tied off the oar once again. Though you can call me squire if you like. I seem to recall being granted that title some time ago. Squire Carlos it is then, said Morella with a smile. And your friend, is he a lord or of the gentry also? Yes, my lady, the senior tribune is a lord, though he was born to the artisans class. But he is not my friend, at least not the way you mean it. We are brother soldiers, milady. We live in each other's skins. We have faced death together, and in many respects we are closer than most husbands and wives. But we are not friends, he explained between spoonfuls of stew and bites of bread. I understand what my father calls the companionship of arms, a relationship closer than family, forged in common service, tempered in the fires of battle. I never really understood it till now. Yes, milady. I think maybe you do. I have seen the fire in your eyes. And I saw the concern too when he passed out. There have been times when I have truly hated him, and still loved him like a brother at the same time. He is a hard man, my lady. He does not give with his emotions easily, but I have seen him weep openly after battle. How is he able to cast magic when the essence flows have stopped, Squire Pandarian? Morella suddenly asked. I don't know, milady. I can't cast magic myself. I have only a vague idea of how it's supposed to work under normal circumstances. All I can tell you, milady, is that he can work magic while in metal armour, and I have seen him cast spells in null zones during an essence storm, even while chained in mithril. So I am not surprised that he is able to cast magic now, replied Darian with a slight smile. What will you imperial oaths allow you to tell me of his background, family, friends, and prior service? I am sorry, milady, but not much. I have given the third imperial oaths, and it's better if I do not know those sorts of things. I am not even sure that I know his real name. You see, my duty is to protect him, and if necessary kill him so that he cannot be captured and put to the question. The less I know about him, the less I will reveal when I am captured. As for tales of our service together, I am sure you know I am prohibited by the oaths from discussing anything of that nature, not that I am able to in any case. You, being the daughter of a senior ranking officer, must be familiar with the service Gaius spells. Yes, Squire Pandarian, I certainly am. I have been subjected the second oaths myself since I was a child. It is a pity. Several of the ladies have wounds that require healing spells that I am now unable to cast. I was hoping that the Tribune would tell me how he is able to work magic, so that I could tend to them. Perhaps I can help, milady. Tucking the steering oar under his arm, he reaches into his pouch and brings out 2 small black glass vials. These are potions, milady. Each has 5 doses of healing. I don't know if they will still work, but you are welcome to them if they do. Also, please pass on my compliments to those who cooked. It was very good. Startled, she looked from the 2 black vials, up to Pandarian's face, back down to the vials. Oh, thank you, Squire Pandarian, thank you. These should be fine. Potions store the essence for the spells contained. These will be more than enough to help everyone. Then they are yours. Keep any portions that remain in case they are needed later, replied Pandarian. Interlude. Halls of Judgment. Till this moment I was not even aware that I knew any of this. How is that possible? Asked Grey. Your ears heard the sounds and your soul remembered, responded Zorkamore. Interesting. So do you think that you will be able to determine what the Lady Destiny is up to by having me recall my complete life? That is not the purpose. You must recall your complete life, so that it may be judged, and the fate of your soul determined, replied Blind Koss. But if the lady has already determined what my soul's fate will be, does it not defeat the purpose of having my life judged in the first place? Don't try to reason with the powers that be, or point out the errors in their reasoning, or the flaws in their arguments. The results are unbelievably painful. Gray's fourth law. I warned you not to aggravate the judges, as it would be very painful. It is their nature to judge. They could no more forego the process that you could give up breathing. Besides, it is necessary that you recall your life. You need to learn some unpleasant things about yourself, as well as having some ill-conceived notions corrected, stated Lady Destiny. Like the fact that I am only able to recall this past life, when I should be able to recall all my lives, or the fact that I am or was not completely human, or that my parents were not my real mother and father. Those sorts of unpleasant things, and as for the ill-conceived notions, that I am not really as proficient as I thought I was, nor as tough, what with Destiny always stepping in to haul my ass out of the fire. He counted off the various items till he had made a tight fist. No, those are the obvious things, that you more than half suspected while you lived. What I'm referring to are those unpleasant things that you have always avoided thinking about at all, Destiny replied with some sorrow in her voice. I am not really dead, am I? This is my real body. I am even wearing my old boots, asked Gray, avoiding the implied suggestion that it was about time he started thinking about the unpleasant. Yes, you died. I just made use of your old body, instead of creating a soul body for you. As you had a contingency on your boots, to return to you if they became too separated, they rejoined you once you were removed from the world plane. Doesn't that break all sorts of rules? Yes, but it was your destiny to be dead with your boot on. She laughed as she faded from his perception. Dead with my boots on, her puns are as bad if not worse than my own, muttered Gray, once again taking up his quill and stabbing it into the ink font he begins to write. The first time I saw Darian, he was in formation in a mud pit that is used to train legionnaires in coping with battlefield magic. He was the simulated leader, about to lead his troops through the barrage field as I and 4 others would be lobbing artillery magic effects across their area. The secret to doing this without harming the troops is timing, with most of the spells being nothing more than smoke and flash, with just a few real effects to help keep the troops awake. You cast the spell just as the lead legionnaire is leaving the effect area. As the lead man dashed to the first cover wall, I powered up a Force 10, 25 arms radius pyrosphere with a release set for a centre of effect 26 arms above the ground, centred on the tree stump, timed to arrive on target in 18 ticks. The troops are trained to move out quick on a 1 to 2 count, to provide spacing. The second troop moves out, 1, 2, then the third, and so on. It takes 12 ticks for the squad to clear an area. But in this case, the fifth of his troop tripped and twisted her leg, jamming her foot into an exposed root about 10 seconds after I fired the mid-sized pyro ball. Darian saw her go down and rushed to grab her. As he tried to pick her up in a shoulder hold, her jammed foot refused to give and he fell face first into the mud, completely covering her 112 standard body with his 2 standard 1. He was in full armour, of course, torso, arms, legs and head encased in iron. With just a bit of luck on their part, and a whole lot of skill on mine, they were barely injured. I quick cast a semi-solid 10 square foot frigid hydra wall aligned parallel to the horizon, at about 5 arms above the mud, timing its arrival to the tick instant before the pyro ball was set to explode over their position. The result was, they were flooded with nearly scalding hot water falling on them instead of being engulfed in elemental flame. A very nice bit of casting, if I do say so myself. There they were in their small puddle of warm liquid mud surrounded by fired hardened clay slabs, instead of ending up carbonized humanoid remains. The section commander called me over to the raised platform she was standing on, as the Legion's first centurion was running up to the very fortunate mud-covered duo. That was a very impressive bit of casting, Greylanus. I am putting you in for a commendation. "I am very impressed indeed," stated the uniformed officer. Her midnight blue magic auxiliary's uniform was completely unadorned, except for the 3 black pentagrams that designated centurion rank in the auxiliaries. "I am sorry, but I request that you do not do that, centurion. I did not do it for the recognition, nor for any other reward. Any attempt to draw this to the attention of anyone up the chain of command will be met with very severe repercussions that I would rather not fall on you." "I will make that an order if you prefer," I stated, as I pined on my own gold 6 pentagrams over crossed swords encircled in a ring of fire that are sometimes used to show rank in the Phoenix Guard. "You understand, centurion. I was never here. You never saw me. What happened was that the 2 casters on the end did the casting. Do you understand?" I commanded. "Yes, sir, I understand. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. Just some quick thinking on the part of 2 junior casters on the end of the firing line," answered the centurion. I gave her my best wish we had more time smile as I turned and walked a short distance away, and long-stepped back to the officers' barracks area of the training camp. The next time I saw Darian was about 4 months later, when the training company was about to receive their wolves. I guess that I should explain that the wolves are the wolf's head insignia that each trooper receives when they become a legionnaire. The insignia are black for junior grade, silver for mid-grade, and gold for senior grade. He was standing as troop leader with his gold wolf's head in the first section, first rank of the first century of the first cohort, not bad for the middle son of 9 children of mid-ranking provincial bureaucrats. If he had the funds, he could have graduated 5th centurion black or even higher. But as it is, receiving his wolf insignia in the first troop position is sometimes better. Merit citations count for a lot more than political connections out on the frontier where he thinks he is headed. So there he was standing, not 15 paces from where I was sitting, in the review stands. Straight, tall, still wearing the full armour of the Assault Legion he thought he was going to join out on the Valencia frontier. But I had other ideas for him, and the duly authorised orders to pull his ticket. I was wearing the red, whites and 3 praying hands insignia of the chaplain's corps, along with the holy medallion of Zexi, goddess of battle and honour. She's very popular with the troops, especially the newbies, as they get hammered with the old Empire victory honour rah 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 as they undergo boot training. I was having an interesting conversation with a fellow chaplain whose daughter was out in the field somewhere in the 4th cohort. He was also a priest of Zexi, like I said, very popular among the troops, though he was in a conservative sect, while I am with a very liberal one. We continued our discussion of the relative merits of conservative vs liberal religious practices as the troops marched past in review. After the Legion command group passed, we blessed each other in our goddess's name, he to join his daughter and I, long steeped, to the training legion's command tower. Along the way, I removed the facade illusion of the clergy uniform and insignia, carefully removed my holy medallion observing the proper ritual, and packed it away in my ever-handy dimensional pocket, and added the 6 silver wolves to my insignia patch. In case you were wondering, yes, I am a priest of Zexi. In my line of work, it's good to have every edge I can get. And yes, I can hear the question, what's it like travelling by long step? What do you see? How does it feel? What happens if the spell fails? What's it like? Well, it's like walking through water. It takes effort, the faster you want to go, and the more resistance there is. One of the practical considerations is that it requires a specially trained horse to travel by long step. They have to be trained from the day of their birth. Some even go as far as to having the mare give birth there. As for what do you see? Well, as you enter the long step, the world around you gets dimmer, and everything takes on a yellowish tint. As you begin to walk, things become more orange ahead of you, remains yellow off to the sides and above and below, and green behind you. The faster you travel, the more orange and green things become. As you walk, the path of lesser resistance is to not try to push through any real-world materials such as walls and the like. It is impossible to pass through anything with its own aura, such as living beings including plants, or anything magical. These auras are very visible, and if you accidentally contact one, the long step spell could fail depending on the mass you intercept. You can travel in any direction, including up, and most casters usually climb up above the surrounding terrain, just travel to their destination before climbing down again. Birds, insects, and the like do not present much of a problem, mostly because they have almost no mass compared to your average caster, but there is still a risk. As for how does it feel? Well, like I said before, it is a lot like walking through water. There is the resistance, but you do not feel anything rushing past you, like you would walking through a strong wind or a fast current. As a matter of fact, if you are wearing a cloak, it will not flap about. It will just hang down as if you were perfectly still. There is no sensation of movement, which can cause some problems with disorientation and motion sickness. Your eyes are telling your brain that you are traveling very fast, and your other senses can detect no motion at all. If the spell fails, the minor effects can include dizziness, spatial disorientation, to profound shock to your system, including neurodisruption and death. If you suffer a serious contact, or with large, massive objects with strong auras, you can be ripped to shreds. As for what everyone on the world plane sees, there is a faint transparent glow of the caster's magical effect as they pass by. I am sure you have seen the magically ionized trails before. You know those faint streaks of coloured light, and the faint sizzling sound as they pass. As I approached the command tower, I could see Darian pacing back and forth in front of the two guards at the tower's entryway. When I emerged from the long walk and headed up the walkway to the tower, all three snapped to attention. I told the guards that Darian was with me, and as I put my hand over the door's entry orb, it flashed green and the door opened. "After you, Troop Leader Pandarian," I said as I gestured him inside. "I am up on the 3rd floor, west door. Head on up, and I will join you shortly. There are refreshments on the side table. Help yourself." "Sir." "Yes, sir," he snapped in a low, crisp voice. "3rd floor, west door, sir. Yes, sir." With my best bemused smile on my face and my number 2 twinkle sparkling in my eye, I watched Darian climb the stairs as I approached the OD's desk across the entry hall. I removed my command orders from my belt pouch and presented them to the corporal sitting behind the desk. He took the parchment, unfolded, and read the orders. His eyes bugged out a bit, and he stood up at attention and asked me, "What are your orders, sir?" "Verify the orders, Corporal, and then we will talk," I casually suggested. He picked up the small hammer lying on the desk and struck the bronze table bell sitting on the right side of the desk, twice. He remained standing at attention while the Centurion, officer of the day, came out of the OD's office. When he saw me, he snapped to attention and saluted. Without a word, the corporal handed the OD the parchment and clearly announced, "Orders to be verified, sir." The Centurion nodded, with a crisp, "Very well, Corporal." And a passing salute to me, he re-entered the office and closed and secured the door. "At ease, Corporal. You might as well sit down and relax. Your Centurion will be a while," I kindly suggested with a smile. He sat down but was far from relaxed. He continued to watch me as I wandered around looking at the display cases and unit citation plaques that decorated the walls. The 22nd Legion was one of the more decorated ones, and was usually one of the first sent into battle. I must have spent 10-12 minis before the OD's door opened again and the Centurion emerged. He spotted me and approached at a quick parade march. As he did so, the corporal jumped to attention once again. "Sir, orders verified, sir," he loudly proclaimed. "What are your orders, sir?" "Secure the command tower, Centurion. Condition Red 5, I calmly replied. "Yes, sir, secure the command tower, condition Red 5, he shouted. He and the corporal quickly approached the black stone pillars on either side of the OD's office door and inserted their crystal keys. As the crystals clicked into place, the 2 pillars slowly turned red as the various magical fields powered up. When the 2 pillars finished their colour change, the Centurion and corporal removed the crystals and approached me, both handing me their crystals. "Command tower secured, condition Red 5, sir," said the Centurion. "Thank you, Centurion Corporal. I will be a while. You two might as well relax. I will call if I need anything." "Thank you, sir," replied the Centurion. "If you are interested, condition Red 5 seals the installation, preventing anyone from entering or exiting, blocks all forms of scrying, In addition, the installation becomes for the duration of the alert, sanctified and hallowed ground of the patron god of the empire, Janus, Lord of Light, the creator. I snapped off a pre-prepared long step spell suitably modified, so that I arrived just outside the third floor's west door. Opening the door, I nodded to Darian, who was standing by the side table pouring an ale, and walked behind the desk and sat down. "So, Troop Leader Pandarian, what are your career plans?" I asked. "Sir, serve my 60 with honour and distinction, then retire to become a landholder on the frontier, sir," quoted Darian. "Very good, Troop Leader. Standard answer to a standard question," I replied dryly. "But how about providing a more personal response?" "Sir, that is pretty much my plan. It may be a stock plan, but it has the advantage of being simple and easily obtainable. You serve your 60, don't accumulate to many demerits, and your retirement bonus in land or money is assured. As I said, it has served many before me, and it should serve me well too, sir," explained Darian. "Yes, it does, Troop Leader. It is an adequate plan for an adequate soldier, but you are far more than an adequate soldier. Senior ranked troop leader of the first section, first rank, of the first century, of the first cohort. With a bronze star for courage, for staying and protecting your trooper during training. Very high personal scores while training with no less than 6 camp records and setting the Empire record in the javelin. No, Troop Leader, you are not merely adequate, and I don't think that you would be happy with a barely adequate career plan. Would you, Troop Leader?" I asked with a slightly sad tone to my voice. "Yes, sir. I mean no, sir," he immediately responded with a slight blush. "I don't have the station to hope for more, and with the Empire at peace, I have little hope of distinguishing myself on the battlefield or accumulating large shares of loot and prize monies. Sure, I got off to a good start, maybe to good a start. Anything I do after this will be compared to what I have previously done, and I don't think I have much more of that sort of luck." "An interesting point of view, Troop Leader, wrong, but nevertheless interesting. If you are interested, Force Leader, I have an alternate career plan in mind. If you are interested," I said with my best, friendly fatherly smile, and an encouraging tone to my voice. "The risks are greater, but so are the rewards. For one, you get 2 more gold wolves for your patch." "What sort of risks are we talking about, sir?" he asked. "The sort that require a soul oath before I can even discuss them with you, Troop Leader," I informed him with a slight smile. "And if you do not take the oath, you will not remember this conversation." "Sir, yes, sir, just who are you, sir? I mean you're no legionnaire, you with the spooks or something?" he asked. "The or something comes closest, Troop Leader," is said, tossing he a Phoenix Guard insignia across the desk to him, with a very wicked grin on my face. "Holy frack, you're a goddamned fire chicken. What do the burning birds want with me? I am loyal, I haven't done anything wrong," said Darian with an angry voice. "Calm yourself, Troop Leader. You're right, you are loyal and you have done nothing wrong. What you are is someone with the right skill set, physical ability, and proven loyalty. You are almost ideal for the purpose I have in mind, or I should say you will be once you successfully complete a great deal more training. Now, are you willing to take the soul oath so I can tell you what I have in mind, or do I walk out that door? And as far as you are concerned, this will have never happened," I asked with a little expression on my face as I could manage. "Hell no," he exclaimed. "I want nothing to do with any of you damned fire chickens at all, so bring on whatever you have to. I would rather forget and get on with my life," he stated with barely controlled anger. I got up and walked around the desk and calmly walked to the door. As I did so, I triggered the forget spell and left the office. The next time I saw Darian was about a minute later, when I opened the door and nodded to him sitting at the desk as I walked around the desk and sat down and started all over again. We actually had to go through 8 more interviews before I got some agreement out of him by not telling him about the guard. That agreement was only partial though. He would take the oath, and if he did not like what he heard after, he would still back out. As a priest, I administered the soul oath and the first geas of loyalty to the throne. He was a little shaken by the experience, and had to sit down for a couple of minutes. On the other hand, I have seen people go into a coma for a couple of days after taking the oath. When he recovered, I filled him in on what I had in mind. "All right, Centurion. You are about to undergo a great deal of training. When you are done, the two of us are going to be going behind enemy lines where you will be doing everything you can to keep me alive. Whereas I will be working to get us killed," I told him with my number 2 friendly smile and a good laugh. "You're a fire chicken, aren't you? I've been conned into joining the damned fire chickens," he said, working his way up to a screaming fit again. "We are both fire chickens, and if I ever hear you use that term or any of its cousins, I will rip you a new asshole where your head used to be. Do I make myself clear, Centurion?" I ordered. "Yes, sir, this damned fire chicken understands, sir," he challenged with a tone that suggested that I could bring on whatever I could, and we would see who got the new asshole. My response was to hit him with a force impact spell that sent him through the closed office door, shattering it to tinder and into a newly introduced depression in the wall beyond. I then hit him with a barrage of force bolts that were hitting him like sling bolts in various locations about his body. I suspect that was when I broke his 3 ribs and his left forearm. I broke his leg when I slammed him into the ceiling with a lift spell, and they into the floor with the reverse. He was unconscious by this point, so I went back into the office, poured myself a goblet of wine, and grabbed myself a chair and placed it in the remains of the doorway, parked myself and waited for him to come to. I have always been impressed with Darian's constitution. He is built like a bull, and is at least 3 times as hard to knock about. I had no sooner gotten comfortable when he kicked out with his good leg, causing the chair and yours truly to go flying back into the office. I slid the 15 arms into the desk, breaking my left collarbone, as well as stunning me for a few seconds. When I could focus again, he was using part of the door jamb as a crutch, and coming at me with a chair leg I suspect he was going to use to beat me with. I was still a little dazed, enough so that I was not able to focus enough to cast any spell. So I triggered a stored spell, and he flew through the door again into and through the wall on the other side of the doorway, breaking his other leg. Before I could recover enough to pick myself up, he had already crawled through the wall and was making his way towards me. By this point, my patience had worn thin, and so I cast a lighting ball and began to power it up till sparks began to fly off me into the floor, walls and ceiling. "That will be enough, Centurion," I told Darian. "Or would like a lighting suppository?" "You son of a bitch, how can you cast spells wearing armour?" he asked. "No one can cast spells with that much metal on them. Just what kind of bastard are you?" "I am the bastard with the lighting bolt about to fry your arse off. Now are you going to take the hint, or do I go looking for someone else to guard my arse?" I asked, with a certain amount of anger. I then let fly with the bolt, passing to the over his head with a narrow margin, through the doorway, through the hole in the wall, where it detonated with an echoing boom, blowing the wall into the hallway. "Well, Centurion, I am waiting," Is asked with a smile. "Sir, yes, sir, I will take the hint, sir," he said with some anger. "But don't expect me to be too motivated during training." "Don't worry, Centurion. I can assure you that your DIs will be very happy to provide all the motivation you will ever need." "Now let's get a medic in here and see to your injuries before you bleed to death," I said with my number 3 grin. I called down to the corporal and Centurion, told them to lift the condition red 5 and to get a couple of medics. Darian was treated enough to stop the bleeding before he was carted off to the healers. My shoulder required a priest of Zexi prayers for a full heal to mend the bone and repair the nerve damage. Luckily, there was such a cleric on the grounds. Well, it was not really luck. I did arrange for my companion at the parade grounds to be able to attend his daughter's ceremony. It's funny how these things happen. His daughter was the same trooper, who caught her foot in the root, and who suffered minor scald burns that required extra healing from the clerics. Well, maybe not that funny. Her foot would not have caught if I did not jam it in the first place with a trap spell. The next time I saw Darian was a couple of months later. I was sitting in the office of the Commandant of the Phoenix Guard in the Imperial Summer Palace, enjoying a glass of Imperial Special reserved wine. "Grey, Your protégé has a serious attitude problem. Everything with him is a contest of wills. Even Martus is beginning to have doubts that he is worth the trouble," said the commandant. I laughed and then said, "I know, but it's that stubbornness that I want. He just doesn't give up. It may even keep me alive one of these days. But you are right. It's time that the insubordination ends and he begins to really train." "When is he due?" I asked. As I asked the question, I could hear the sounds of several elephants marching in step, coming up the hallway towards the commandant's office. There were the usual parade de commons, then silence, followed by a loud double bang on the door. The door then opened and in marched Darian and his 3 guardsmen escort. They came to parade rest before the commandant's desk and snapped to attention. "Centurion Pandarian reporting as ordered, sir," stated the guardsman corporal with a sharp salute. "Thank you, corporal. You and your guardsmen may wait outside," responded the commandant. The guardsmen march out of the office and closed the door behind them. And then the commandant just looked at Darian for almost a full minute. Finally he said, "You have a visitor, Centurion," as he pointed to where I was sitting on the bench that ran along the wall. He then got up and left the office by the other door. Darian turned and looked at me, and you could see the anger just rise up like a firestorm. "At ease, Centurion," I said, "and sit down. My neck is still a little stiff from our last meeting." There was just the hint of a grin as he moved to the offered chair and sat down. "Now are you going to stop the passive, aggressive resistance and start to really give it your all in training? Or do I have to break more of you bones?" I asked with a straight face. "Sir, this cadet trainee has a serious moral issue, sir," he said, reciting the ritual. "Knock it off, Pandarian. I'm not impressed with your ability to recite the Code of Conduct manual. Do you know how I managed to get your ticket pulled from the Legion and into training here? Have you actually given it any thought at all? Surely you must realise just how rare an occurrence you being here is. You are only the 4th Raw Boot Legionnaire that has ever been inducted into the Guard. What it takes is something like this," I stated, handing him the original orders. "If you will notice the Imperial seal and signature, that writes you are here by direct Imperial decree, and your continued resistance to command authority could result with you sitting in the Red Room, awaiting death," I informed him. "Look, whatever your name is, I don't want to be in the Guards," he said as I interrupted him. "It does not matter what you want, Centurion. It is enough that His Imperial Majesty wants you here. And as the loyal subject you claim to be, you should want to be here too," I reasoned. "Yes, sir. What are your orders, sir?" He parroted the manual again. "Pandarian, what exactly is your problem with the Guard? There is nothing in your records to indicate that you or your family ever had any problems with the Guard." "Sir, I have no problem with the Guards. I did not sign up to be in the Guards. I signed up to be a Legionnaire, sir. It's the Legions that do the fighting. All the Guards is put on their fancy uniforms and strut around like peacocks. All flash, no fire, as my grandmother says." "Pandarian, you are talking about the Imperial Guard, who are only one element of the Phoenix Guard. I don't agree with your assessment of them, but you are not joining the Imperial Guard. You are joining the Commandos." "Sir, the Commandos use magic, sir. I don't have any magic. I can't cast spells. I am not qualified to join the Commandos, sir." "Pandarian, if you remember, I have enough magic for the both of us. We are going to be a team. Your job is to make sure I am not bothered while I am take care of everything else. Now knock off the frackin' guardhouse bullshit and stop calling me sir. My name is Sebastian Antonius Greylinus. You can call me Bastian, so for the next rest of this conversation, no sir, no rank, no military rah-rah. I am Bastian, and I will call you Darian, am I clear?" "Yes, S's." "Bastian, you are clear, SS," answered Darian. "Better, now sit down, loosen your collar and relax," I ordered. He sat down in a wooden chair that was just able to support him. Gods, but he is big. He is almost 2 standards tall, and he must weigh 20 stone of muscle and bone, and according to barracks talk, he is very pleasing to the ladies in his equipment. He has muscle on muscle. His upper arms are bigger than my thighs. He is fast, with the reflexes of a cat, quiet even when he moves in armour, and best of all smart, not just field smart but book smart. He's good with languages, speaks 6 that are listed in his file as a native and maybe 5 or 6 more dialects. But best of all, he is very proficient with every weapon in the Imperial arsenal, especially the long blades and spears. He can fight in line from horseback, skirmish like a demon, and in tight quarters he's a one-man barroom brawl. He has no known vices, sticks to 4 ale at a sitting, doesn't do pipeweed, and has never gambled. He can ride like he was born to the saddle, both land and air beasts. He can swim like a fish, run like a wolf, all this with the grace of a cat. All right, Darian, here's the deal. For the remainder of your training, we are going to be a team. We will eat, sleep, drink, and we will piss and have bowel movements together. We will be so close that we will be in each other's skin, like we were joined at the hip. I will get things done, and you will prevent anyone from stopping me. Understand? I think so. I will be sort of like a bodyguard, taking the dagger for you, as they say. Close, but not quite. More like a sheepdog protecting the wolf from the hordes of sheep. I can take care of the daggers. It's the crowds trying rip me to shreds that you're going to deal with. In some cases, it's not going to be possible to get in and out undetected. Usually because I will need to handle something in person and not by remote trigger. You will be in charge of making sure I am not bothered, and I will be in charge of getting the job done, then getting us out, understand? Oh yes, so tell me, how long did your last partner last? I have never had a partner before. There was never really a need. Previous to my last 2 missions, I was doing nothing overt, mostly a lot of peep work, with the occasional Widowmaker job thrown. But my last 2 missions were different. I can't discuss the specifics, but let's say I have had to go in and handle things in a personal way. On my last one, I was just finishing the mission task. When I was jumped by a 10 or 12 very unhappy warrior types, I beat them back long enough to get the mission done. But I left a big mess getting out. While they did not get enough evidence to know who did it, they got more than enough to know that those we were trying to incriminate were not responsible. So what you saying is that you're a spook, and I am going to be some sort of helper spook? No, the term you are looking for is commando. Spooks are civilians who work the diplomatic side. Commandos are soldiers who work the military side. Our adversaries are going to be military in nature. Our mission targets will be military or military-related. I can't imagine being assigned to a civilian target. We would be like fish out of water. Besides, the Emperor has the spooks for that side of things. Well, I am not happy about the being a fire chicken, but you got yourself a sheepdog. Does that mean I get the fancy dress blue uniforms and the feathered helmet? No, that's the impies. We don't exist, so why would we need uniforms? If you ever need a dress uniform, pick whichever service you like and wear theirs. Same for insignia, we don't have one, so wear whatever branch you like. I usually stick to the standard Phoenix Guard, pentagram over crossed swords, encircled by a ring of fire. You can stick with the Legion Wolves if you like. After all, you are still carried on their roles, and if I remember, you are listed as on detached service somewhere at sea. Nice. So that explains why I haven't received any mail. Really nice. No. Actually, the reason that you have not received any mail is that you have been on punishment detail on an almost continuous basis, so you have not been given your mail. I am sure the Commandant will allow you can have it before we return to barracks. Any other questions, or can we get back to training? No more questions. Let's get going. We have a 2-march hike to complete before we get to eat tomorrow, he replied with an innocent smile. There is no percentage in worrying about what might happen. Gray was awakened by the drumming sound of rain falling. Someone had completely covered him with a canvas sheet, and his head rested on a cloth bundle. He was laid out on the centre deck, alongside the mast where he had collapsed. He pulled the canvas down from over his head. The rain that fell on him was cold and tasted of ash, leaving a rather nasty taste in his mouth. He looked around and saw that Darian was still sitting on an overturned water barrel at the steering oar, and Morella was with one of the women under an awning toward the bow, trying to start a fire in the ship's brazier to prepare some hot food and drink. He reached out with his aura and infused enough mana into the raw cotton tinder that the faint heat of the sparks thrown off the flint immediately caused it to burst into flame. I suppose that I could have just ignited the coals, but I am still too weak from the effort it took to get us this far, he half said to himself as he took stock of his surroundings. He sat up, stretched the aches and pains from my joints and muscles, and hauled himself to his feet. He gathered enough mana into his aura to heal the minor inflammation in his muscles and joints. Then he walked over Lady Morella and the woman, and with his number 2 friendly smile he asked, "Do you still want to learn how I worked magic, Lady Morella?" "Oh yes, very much," she replied. "Good." Sitting down on a nearby crate, he continued, "The first thing then is that I will have to temper your aura so that it becomes sensitive to the mana field. I will be doing that by infusing raw mana into your aura's outer bands. Then I can proceed to teach you to see the mana field. Once you can easily sense the mana, I will begin your instruction in its manipulation. Now to begin, allow your eyes to refocus as you would when preparing to perceive your aura, once you can perceive it, so a complete survey of your entire aura, and make sure that there are not lingering charged arcane glyphs or runes anywhere. If there are, we will have to discharge or remove them. Make absolutely sure that there are no traces of any charged arcane symbols at all. You bring mana into contact with essence within an aura. They will react violently with each other and you, disrupting your entire nervous system or more likely kill you. Once you're sure there is no lingering essence within your aura, shift your focus to the upper bands." "I can see the upper bands now. The outermost bank is wavering slightly as if it were reacting to the wind," she replied with an excited voice, caused by her early success. "That wavering is your aura's reaction to the other living auras in the air, as they are buffeted about by the wind," he explained. "You are doing very well, Morella. Now continue to focus on the wavering. Let me know when that wavering changes," Grey instructed. Gathering his will, he focused on the surrounding mana field and began to slowly infuse large amounts of mana into the outer boundary of Morella's aura. Almost at once, Morella called out, "The outer band has developed sparkles and tiny points of bluish light. Are you doing that?" "Yes, I am infusing your outermost band with mana. Now as the band becomes brighter, you will start to see something like silvery mists beyond your aura. When you do, don't say anything. Here, take my hand and squeeze it when you do," he said, offering her his hand. Taking his right hand, she closed her eyes again and nodded. He continued to apply mana to her aura's outer band, and then he began to increase the amounts. After about 2 or 3 minis, she squeezed his hand. "Now," he said, "look beyond the aura's outer boundary and into the mists. When you can clearly see the swirling particles of mana that make up the mists, open your eyes." After just a moment or two, she opened her eyes and said, "Has this always been there? The swirling mists, I mean. It's like I am seeing the world for the first time. It's amazing, the way the particles dance around everyone's aura, and the birds too. And yet they go through the ship as if it were not there. What are those sparkles in the air? I have been told that they are very small life forms, too small for the eye to see. That sparkle is the mana field's interaction with their individual auras." "This is fantastic. What do I do now?" she asked in an excited voice. "Refocus your eyes so that your vision returns to normal, like you would when you are finished perceiving the essence flows." He watched her eyes loose the inner glow of mana sight as her eyes returned to normal. "Good. Now practice perceiving the mana field and returning to normal sight. You remember the old drills for essence perception? It's the same thing. When you can slip in and out with ease, I will go on to the next step. You can start in a few minutes, we have something to discuss. Come with me to the stern so I can brief Carl at the same time." Turning, he walked to the stern, checking the rigging and ship as he went. The woman going about their activities appeared to be much healthier this morning, less bruised and batter, and less withdrawn. He grabbed the chest from the deck as he passed it, and continued toward Darian at the steering oar. "Thank you for grabbing this, in all the confusion, Darian," slightly lifting the chest. "I truly appreciate the effort it must have taken." Darian nodded his head, his usual response to praise, suppressing a yawn in the process. "Give me a few minutes, then you can get some sleep. I have something to go over before you do, though. Can you take it for a minute? Indicating the steering oar. While I relieve myself, Bastian, I think my bladder is about to burst, he said with a laugh. Sure, he replied. The slop bucket is under the foredeck. Getting up from the barrel, Darian held the steering oar, wait for Bastian to take it. Moving the barrel out of the way, he took the oar from Darian, then watched him as he walked forward, as he passed Morella. He watched as they nodded to one another, then watched as she started to walk toward him, carrying a covered bowl and cup of a dark hot liquid she had been handed by the woman who had been with her earlier. Ah, the earth-scented aroma of roasted bean, just what a person needs first thing in the morning, said Gray, as Morella handed him the wooden cup and bowl. Looking up from his cup after he took a long sip, he smiled up at Morella. Thank you from the bottom of my very being. I am sure that all the powers that be will reward you for your generosity and effort this day, he said with his best polished number 2 smile and his number 1 most sincere look in his eyes. You, sir, are a rogue of the worst sort, she said, patting herself down with exaggerated motions. I should make sure that my coin purse is still in place after a look like that, she continued with a smile. Pointing toward the covered bowl that Gray had put down on top of the barrel, he moved near the steering oar. The bowl contains gruel and cubes of roasted bacon, she said as she continued to smile. Sitting down on an overturned crate, she then adjusted the hood of her cloak to provide more protection from the light rain that continued to fall. You have to keep things covered, or the sour rain will ruin the already poor taste of the food, she informed Gray as Darian approached them. Picking up the covered bowl, Gray lightly kicked the remaining crate over to Darian, gesturing that he should sit. Putting the now empty cup on the deck, he tied off the steering oar, to pick up the bowl and proceeded to eat the gruel and bacon, keeping the cover mostly in place to protect the food. Lady Morella, what I have to tell you and Darian is held in the strictest secrecy, Gray said as he finished the simple meal, putting the bowl down beside the cup. You will not discuss this with anyone, not even each other, and even more important, you must act as if you do not know what I am going to tell you, no matter how personal the tragedy is to you. Do you understand? He said, looking into their eyes in turn while he waited each of their responses. When they both agreed, he told them of the horrors he saw on the battle display of the Griffin. Valencia is no more. The homeland took several hits from star rocks the Batorna caused to drop from the void. Some were as big as large hills. That wave swell you felt earlier was the after effects of our island home sinking into the sea. The surrounding cities on the mainland were smashed by the resulting tidal waves. I suspect that only the more distant inland colonies have survived. We can expect severe weather changes resulting from the destruction. Most likely there is going to be a breakdown of weather patterns for the next couple of years. This year's growing season is most likely not going to be good. The lingering effects of the intercontinuum battle magics used are going to have a profound effect on the essence flows for some time to come. It is going to take the better part of all the powers of the High Lords to repair the damage to the inner planes, and I suspect that they will have very little left for mortal concerns. We came very close to destroying all existence as we know it. If your father and the Imperator had not pulled back at the very last, none of us would be here right now. Lady Morella, you are a priestess of Salminar the Wise, are you not? He asked. Yes, she replied. You will no longer be able to receive his grace nor be granted miracles. I deeply regret to tell you that he has been destroyed. He sacrificed himself containing a demon from beyond the veils that had been released by the dying Batorn magicians as revenge for Batorna's total destruction. She let out a slight gasp and slumped. She would have fallen to the deck had Darian and Gray not grabbed her. Darian looked at him, his face ashen, his eyes containing all the horror the small man felt in his soul. They held her up as they moved her crate back into place and sat her down, the other women toward the bow, none the wiser. Just how bad is it, Sebastian? Valencia gone, Batorna destroyed, gods dead. Is there any hope at all? He looked at him with his true smile and reminded him of what all soldiers know to be true. You don't need hope, Pandarian. You are alive, breathing, in no immediate danger, and you have already survived the worst that can happen. There is no percentage in worrying about what might happen. Things will be as they will be." He nodded, pulled his hands up behind his head as he laid back onto the side of the ship, stretched out his legs, put a contented smile on his face, and closed his eye. Gray continued to hold Morella, pulling her cloak about her to protect her from the rain. Occasionally she would cry out. He would pull her closer, to comfort her till she once again became quiet. Some time later, after one of Darian's legendary snores started, Morella's eyes opened with a start. She quickly looked around, taking in all that was happening at that moment. After she gathered her thoughts, she turned in Gray's arms to look at him eye to eye. After a brief look of anguish, she put on a slight smile, though the deep pain and sorrow she felt was set permanently in her eyes. As he reluctantly released Morella, he said, "Remember, not a word to anyone. If they ask," he nodded in the direction of the other women, "tell them I conveyed the tragic news of your father's death." The shade wearing the body of a middle-aged though fit man, in the black robes of the recently dead, wearing a pair of calf-high warrior boots, put the white quill down on its holder and closed the ink font he had been dipping it into. Knowing that there was no realistic way to hide what he intended to do, he just reached down to his right boot and unfastened the strap securing it to his lower leg and foot. Removing the boot and black silk foot wrapping, he put the boot on his lap and wrapped the black silk cloth strip around his left arm. Taking the boot, he began to remove various small weapons and small tools from the boot. He ended up with 4 hand-length throwing daggers, diamond chipwire saw, a set of small files, a key blank, a mana-tempered crystal that glowed a faint rose colour, and small holy symbol of the god Zexi. Taking up one of the daggers, he begins to sharpen the quill and refashion a new tip. "They are not going to be pleased that you have that. But then you knew that," stated the Lady Destiny. "I don't think so, but there is not much they can do. After all, you are responsible for my having it here, so what can they do?" replied Grey. "Do not make light of them, Grey Lanus. They are high lords and as such are worthy of your respect," thundered the Lady Destiny. With a chuckle, Grey replied, "Yes, they are, but you are Destiny incarnate, and even they are subject to your office." "True, but it is better to be diplomatic about it," Grey interrupted. "If you had wanted me to be diplomatic, you should have paid more attention to that aspect of my personality then," finishing with his third best innocent grin. "Nevertheless, you will not use the holy symbol while you are in the halls of judgment, Grey Lanus. You will especially not invoke Zexi here, is that understood?" demanded Destiny. "I will keep that in mind, but I am his priest and I do owe him devotion, and even they can't question that. Besides, if you did not want me to have his symbol, you would not have destined me to be dead with my boot on," he said with a laugh. "You know that one gets better every time I say it." With a little laugh of her own, Lady Destiny removed her presence from the halls of judgment. Replacing everything except the knife into his boot, he put it back on his lap. He then picked up the now sharpened quill and placed it once again on its holder. Re-wrapping his foot, he then put his boot back on and tightened the straps. Getting up off the stool, he walked over to a nearby pillar and sat down on the floor with his back against it. Closing his eyes, he relaxed, and after a time, he slept. A welcome change from all the disasters. The drizzle was down to a fine mist. The women were busy cleaning. Earlier, someone had put out a section of sailcloth to collect the rainwater, which was allowed to drain into a few of the empty barrels. Grey ran his finger along the deck railing to gather some of fine ash, and used it as a sympathy in a spell to attract the ash out of the collected rainwater. The woman used the now fresh water to wash clothes, and after putting up one of the barbarian tents, they had turns taking a sea bath, which involved using a couple of sponges, a bucket of soapy salt water, and one of fresh. First they washed themselves using the sponge and soapy salt water. Then they rinsed using another sponge and fresh water. Others had gotten the brazier moved under some more sturdy covering, and were slowing, turning a spit stabbed through several cuts of meat. All this domestic activity looks most unreal, what with it taking place on a barbarian dragon ship. Soon I expected to see throw rugs, curtains, and lace doilies scattered about, Gray said to Morella with his number 3 roguish smile. She laughed and said, "You are a terrible rogue, Sebastian. They are responding to the uncertainty by going about doing the small things women do. Their domestic activity, as you called it, gives them comfort and a small degree of peace. Engaging in these common activities also gives them something to focus on, rather than brooding about their losses and dead loved one." He nodded his understanding and asked, "Who are they? Where do they come from?" "Some of them are the women of Father's estate. Some are the wives and children of those who directly served Father when he was away. A few are the women of the officers who served under Father," she said with a sad tone to her voice. Hearing this forced his mind back to the battle. It was a short time and an eternity ago. Flashback. Deep in the ethereal plain, day 2 of the war. The Admiral had previously made a ship-wide announcement that he had received a psycast from Central Command that Valencia was under attack, and we were ordered to engage the enemy directing that attack. The INV Griffin and her escorts were making their way through the deep ethereal to where our seers knew the enemy magicians, who were causing the star rocks to fall from the void, were based. Gray was in the officers' mess, enjoying a game of daggers with the second officer, the supply officer, flight deck officer, and the Admiral's cook, when he was summoned to the command deck, which was too bad as his hand had a good run of shields and tridents, and the pot stood at 57 gold crowns. He nodded to Pandarian, who was relaxing in a nearby chair reading a Legionnaire field manual. He nodded back, indicating he was going to go take care of the business they had previously discussed. Since the Admiral's announcement, security had been stepped up a few levels, so it took Gray some time to pass through the identity checks necessary to get to the command deck CD. When he got to the final passage leading onto the CD, he was stopped by a half-squad of ship's marines and once again stopped to have his identity check. This time, the check included a cleric of Rador, Lord of Battle and War, who cast a divination spell asking if Gray was indeed the true Sebastian Graylanus, senior tribune, serving as imperial liaison to Admiral Volunturus. When that was confirmed, Gray was handed off to a pair of Imperial Guard assigned to the Admiral, who escorted him down the passageway to the CD, where he was once again checked over by Imperial Guards, who then allowed him to enter the CD. Amongst the crowd gathered around the command deck combat display, Gray spotted the Admiral, and with him were the Imperator and his senior military court, Gray's direct superior among them, which explained the absurd level of security. Gray came to something approaching attention and vaguely saluted as the code of conduct specified. The Imperator smiled, nodded, and turned his thoughts back to the phantasmal combat projection on the display table in front of him. The Admiral returned his salute and nodded to Gray's commanding officer. The Commandant gathered him up with his eyes and directed him to an unused office. As the Commandant made his way astern to the office door, he conferred with the Admiral for a moment, who just nodded his head before he too returned his attention to the combat display. Moments later, the Commandant of the Imperial Commandos joined Gray in the office. All sight and sounds from the command deck ceased as the door closed. "It is good to see you again, Sebastian. The Admiral has made the most glowing reports about you. He has even mentioned you to the Imperator on several occasions. Conversely, you have made several powerful enemies at Fleet Central Command, but then they do not have the same access to the Imperator as does your friend the Admiral. Given that you do not really give a scrat's furry ass what the gold cloaks back at FCC think, it is a good thing that the Imperator supported you. Frack man, he actually laughed as they described your actions when they tried to bring charges against you." "Yes, sir," he replied. "That's it?" "Yes, sir. That's all you have to say?" questioned the Admiral. "No, sir, but the rest would be in violation of the codes of conduct, sir," Gray said in response with a grin. With a laugh, the Admiral responded, "Better not go into it then, though the Imperator may have you go into some of the details when you meet with him. You have been reassigned to his personal service effective immediately, as his military attaché. Here are your dragons. You are to put them on now." "Yes, sir," he replied as he took the 2 dragon insignia bars of a senior tribune and replaced the phoenix bars on his collar tabs. "Goodbye, fire chickens, and welcome to the leaping lizards," he said as he completed the process. Ignoring Gray's comment, the Admiral said, "You are going to need a senior aide. You can have Pandarian. He is not going to be much use to me given his view of things, so you might as well have him. There is a double squad of Marines assigned to you, and the Admiral has transferred a flyer to your command too. Do you have any questions?" "What in the name of all blackness is going on Heronidas? Direct Imperial service, Marines, a flyer, and what amounts to independent command?" "You will be meeting with the Imperator shortly, Sebastian. He wants there to be no doubt in your mind about your orders, so he will be giving them to you personally." "And you would prefer that I don't question you about any of this, especially the legality of having someone in the Imperator's direct service commanding line troops, or an Imperial Guard commanding a naval vessel?" I replied, smiling at the absurdity of the situation. "Let the Imperator explain, Sebastian, then you can decide whether to accept or not," explained the Admiral. "Very well," I replied with a smile. "You can tell the Imperator that I accept the assignment, and that I await his orders." Interlude. Halls of Judgment. If Heronidas wanted me to be sacrificed on the altars of hell, I would have plunged the obsidian blade into my own heart myself, knowing he had a good reason for giving me the order. He may not be able to tell me what was going on or the reasons for my reassignment, but I trusted the man, his honor and integrity. I knew then that he did not expect to survive the coming battle. The general feeling I had gotten in the command center was that none of them expected to survive, Gray wrote in the scroll. "You correct. They knew there was very little chance that they were going to survive. Your mission was conceived as a forlorn hope at best," stated the Lady Destiny. Gray continued with his writing as if he had not heard her response. It was a hell of a thing to suddenly realize that the world I knew had come to an end. The main battle display, a real-time projection created by illusions and phantasmal spell effects, had shown the Valencian capital defences launching every offensive and defensive spell they had at a massive star rock that was going to hit there shortly. Several of the secondary screens showed several other impact sites, and the resulting geological chaos that resulted had already caused the island to start to break apart. If it means anything to you, the Admiral chose you because you had proved so capable in the preparations leading up to the war. It was entirely due to your efforts that the Admiral's battle group was as prepared as it was. If not for your efforts, they would never been in a position to launch their attack, and the Baton wizards would have destroyed most of the world, stated Lady Destiny. Gray barely nodded his head in response as he continued writing. When the strike on the capital did occur, the whole island was destroyed, along with most of the surrounding mainland cities. Those that remained were wiped out by quakes and tidal waves. Gray finished writing, then he put the quill down on its holder and closed the ink font. "Did you know that it is difficult for me to write while you are talking?" asked Gray. "I'm sorry, but it is important for you to realize that they sacrificed themselves so that you and the rest could survive," replied the Lady Destiny. Flashback. Deep in the ethereal plane, day 2 of the war. Gray snapped to attention and gave Heronidas Talonus Adanius, Lord, Commandant of Commandos, the first ever formal salute his rank deserved. It was returned measure for measure, whereupon the Admiral performed a parade ground about face and left the office. A short time later, the Imperator entered the room saying, "At ease," even before Gray could finish getting to his feet, so he finished standing up by coming to a parade rest. "Relax, Tribune. We would like this to be as informal as possible. Sit down if you would, please," the Imperator said as he grabbed a chair, placed in front of the one Gray had been sitting in, and sat down himself. He sat down just after the Imperator did. This may be informal, but there is still Imperial protocol. The Imperator sits first. The Imperator looked at Gray for a few moments, as if trying to decide how to broach the subject. Then he just smiled. "Tribune, both your friends and enemies recommended you. Your friends praised your abilities and your enemies recounted the pain you have caused them. In both cases their words speak highly of you," said the Imperator. "Yes, Your Highness." We do not have much time, so we will get right to the point. Your orders are to take your command, proceed immediately to the Natish colonies, secure the estate and household of Admiral Volunturus, and protect them from harm. You will protect them and their heirs to the end of your days. You will develop the necessary contingency plans for when you are no longer able to provide that protection yourself. I am giving you proconsul powers to act in my name as necessary to carry out these orders, explained the Imperator. Sir, which one of those people is your heir? It will be impossible for me to protect and keep alive that many people, especially in the chaos that is to surely follow this war. Volunturus said you would jump onto the purpose behind these orders, and if we had more time we would have liked to discuss the mental process you underwent to arrive at your conclusion. But we don't. You have your orders, and I am relieved that you understand them so clearly. Getting up, the Imperator went to the door, opened it, and was handed a small chest, a scroll with a military intelligence seal on it, and the silver rod that proclaims proconsul powers, all of which he gave to Grey, who was now standing at parade rest. Grey took the items and placed them on a nearby table. Then he came to attention and saluted the Imperator. Good luck, Senior Tribune Sebastian Talanus Greylanus, said the Imperator as he accepted Grey's salute with a nod. Grey watched as the Imperator left the office and continued to watch as a Marine closed the door after him. He followed the Imperator into the command deck, walked up to the Admiral, saluted him, glanced at the battle display, and saw an image of the world going to hell. As quickly as he could, Grey proceeded to the flyer docking bay and saw Pandarian standing by an armed ethereal flyer talking to a Marine Centurion. As Pandarian saw him, Grey ordered them to get on board and prepare to get underway. He had just reached the boarding ramp when the alert sounded indicating battle stations. Grey had no sooner gotten onto the deck when the ramp was retracted and the Griffin's deck crew launched the flyer out into the ethereal. The naval rating at the helm brought up the flyer's wing sails, and they continued to gain forward motion as the wing sails caught the current of the essence flows. Behind them, the IES Griffin and its escorts were beginning their attack runs. 7 more flyers were launched by the Griffin, which then proceeded to fly ahead of the fleet to engage the enemy base and attack its defences. Just as the Griffin was completing its turn toward the rock that the base was built into, it was hit by a plasma strike right on its command deck. Moments later, 3 of the Griffin's own plasma projectors hit the rock in a blinding rainbow of light. First one, then the second, and quickly the third escort were destroyed by something out of nightmares, a demon from beyond the veils. It was then that Salmanar, the High Lord of Wisdom and Insight, emerged from a divine portal to engage the Veil Demon. The Griffin continued to launch plasma strikes at the rock, hitting it 4 more times, before it was hit a second and last time by the base's plasma projector as it was being destroyed. The strike slammed into the ship's hull right in the middle of the docking bay decks, blasting the stern of the ship from the rest of the hull. Salmanar was now fully engaged with the Veil Demon. Their battle was beginning to disrupt the essence flow. Grey ordered the salesmate to deploy the main and foresails and retract the wing sails when they reached maximum speed. He then ordered the helmsman to make best course to the world plane boundary and to try to put an ethereal curtain or 2 between the enemy base and the flyer. He knew they were not going to make it, but he wanted to be as close as possible before the flyer was too damaged to proceed further. Grey gathered and stored as much raw essence as his aura could hold, knowing that he was going to need it power to open a portal back to the world plane once they reached the boundary. They were approaching an ether curtain when he felt the shock front of a massive essence surge as Salmanar destroyed the Veil Demon Nightmare, sacrificing himself in the process. The flyer was thrown through the curtain almost sideways, ripping the main and foresail riggings from the hull of the flyer. Then all was calm. They were in a slow essence flow on the other side of ether curtain that almost gently carried them along. Pandarian reported 3 dead, 7 in shock and 4 missing out of a total of 27 Marines, and naval crew, more than half his command. The Marine medic was soon tending those suffering from essence shock. The 3 dead were collected and placed in death boxes for later ceremonies and rites necessary to send their souls on to the halls of judgment. There was no sign of the 4 missing. They were most likely on the other side of the curtain, and very dead or worse. As soon as the helmsman recovered, Gray ordered the deployment of the wing sails and once again ordered their course set to the ethereal boundary. He then put Pandarian in command, and taking the chest, scroll and silver rod, he went forward to the captain's cabin. Gray entered the cabin only to find that his entire kit had been thrown all over the place. His 3 service trunks were scattered against the forward bulkhead, 2 travel bags were on the daybed which now lay broken on the deck, and his weapons chest was logged in the upper vent. For some reason he laughed. The stress of the last 2 days and the near-death experience just made the situation funny. He got his weapon chest loose and put it down on the desk, then went to one of his service trunks and set it up side right, and opened it to get at his commando work dress, then opened a travel bag on the remains of the bed to get at his equipment. He stripped off his naval uniform and began to put assorted weapons and tools into place as he dressed from the skin out. It took him a while getting everything in place, as it had been a while since the last time he was this loaded down. He finally got the last dagger into place and closed everything up and loaded everything, including the mattress from the bed, into a bag of holding he had the duty marine bring him. Finally he sat down and read the intelligence report. The part that he noticed right away was the colony section, which was circled in red. It stated that the Batorn had engaged some barbarian clans to attack the Valencian colonies in the Natish territories, aboard the barbarian ship. "Stian Sebastian, are you all right?" asked Morella. She had stopped talking a couple of ticks ago, and Gray's inattention caused her some concern. "Oh, sorry. A bit of battle syndrome, I'm afraid. I was taken back to the battle that killed your father," he replied. "I understand. Father sometimes got the same distant look." "You were saying about the women?" "I was talking about the children. When the raid started, they were sent into the bunkers with the seniors and sealed in. We have to go back. There is no way those few seniors are going to be able to support all the children." With a smile, he told her, "I have already dealt with that yesterday. I pushed a double squad of Marines through from the ethereal into the general area of your father's estate. They will have found the children by now, and they had orders to warn the coastal villages and get those people back to your father's estate." "How did you know about the children and seniors being in the bunkers?" she asked with a suspicious tone in her voice. "I didn't know. As Marines, they would have assessed the situation, dealt with the raiders, and searched for survivors. Besides, they were your father's Marines, and I am sure they know about the bunkers." "Thank you, that is welcome news and a great relief. May I go and tell the women the news, and most are very worried?" "Yes, please do. And you may also tell them that we are on course to Codsport, that being the nearest point to your father's estate. We will be arriving there around the 3rd of night tomorrow." With another smile, she stood up and went to where the women were gathered to spread the good news. Gray could not hear what was being said because of the rock-grinding symphony coming from Pandarian. But there was a lot of crying, laughing, hugging. 2 of the women even began to dance. It was enough to lift his spirits. A welcome change from all the disasters these last few days. Looking up once again at the moons, he adjusted the ship's course a couple of points south. The disk moon, Selena, was edge-on, appearing as a faintly lit sliver of silvery light, but would soon start waxing to its top view phase. The outer cluster moon was in full display. The individual rocky moonlets within their enveloping atmosphere were fully lit as they danced each other. The inner spherical water moon of Vernal was in its spectacular indigo phase, as it was backlit by the sun. Interlude. Halls of Judgment. Putting down the quill once again, Gray stretched to ease his stiff back, then got up and walked around a bit. "This may be a soul body, but it aches just as bad as my old one. And if I am dead, why do I have to sleep?" asked Gray. "Your mind is just in the habit of doing those activities. You are also breathing when you don't really have to, just as you are not really projecting sounds when you speak," replied the Lady Destiny. Not really listening to her answer, Gray said, "What happened to the flows? Why did the essence flows stop?" Observe. At the Vales. Shortly after the death of Salmanar and the destruction of the IES Griffon, The veils, the physical interface between this universe and the multiverse beyond, were totally disrupted. The meta-energy fallout, resulting from the death of Salmanar and the Chaos Demon, was causing ruptures in the very structure of the space-time construct that was, were, is, are, will, would be, the veils. But just as a rupture formed, it was infused with divine power from the many gods now battling to stem the flood of that damage. Other lords of power were attempting to redirect the crushing waves of meta-energy from reaching the veils. All this took enormous levels of power. As a result, only the tiniest amounts of essence were flowing into the universe. For the first time since the time of creation, the essence stopped flowing. What essence remained was gathering in the deep recesses of the universe, where it pooled. It was from these essence pools that the magical aspects of this universe would be powered, enough to just ensure their continuance. The essence flowed once again. The dragons and the great monsters slept, and archforms reverted to their normal forms. Unicorns and Pegasus became horses. The ethereal plane, on board the INV Glorious Flyer. As the essence flows slowed, then stopped, so did the progress of the first naval command of Senior Tribune Sebastian Talanus Greylanus, proconsul to the Imperator, and Capitan of the INV Glorious Flyer. In the captain's cabin, Grey, lacking any external reference, was not aware that his command was slowing. It was only when a naval rating knocked on his door, entered and informed him that they had become becalmed, was he aware that the flows had indeed stopped. He called for an update on their estimated position relative to the ethereal boundary, and he was told that at the last position fix, they were still 25- from the boundary. He opened the chest and found that it contained an imperial ransom of mithril coins and the Imperator's signet ring. He put the rod, scroll and the bag inside and took it with him to find Pandarian. Grey found Pandarian out on the outer stern deck, talking with Sergeant Damien, the Marine Senior NCO, Corporal Kellyan, the Junior NCO. They were observing the Navy ratings as they finished cutting away the remains of the rigging. Another repair party on the forward deck was midway through the process of stowing the remains of the foresail. The main sail was completely missing. "Ah, just the non-gentleman I am looking for," Grey said with a grin, quoting the old military standing joke involving a commissioned officer and gentleman greeting non-commissioned officers and non-gentlemen. "It would appear that we are dead in the ether, with at least 25- travel time to the boundary." Pandarian replied, continuing the old joke. "But at least we work for a living. The CPO, Chief Petty Officer, told me that they will have that mess cleared away within 10-, and they will be able to repair the foresail once the mess has been cleared. But the mains will require a yard work to make right." "Corporal Kellyan, find the CPO and have him report to me here," ordered Grey. "Then go and get your Marines organised for a LAPI, low-altitude portal insertion, in full kit. You will also taking all onboard equipment, and you will be taking the naval personnel with you." "Yes, sir," replied Kellyan with the right forearm and fist across the upper chest salute of the Marines, before he ran off. Turning to Sergeant Damien, Grey said, "I am going to try to put a portal through in the area of the Admiral's estate. According to intelligence reports, there is barb activity in the region. You will secure the estate, organise the retired veterans, and send out messengers to warn that coastal areas that there is a tsunami heading their way, and they are to get to higher ground. If necessary, send them on to Codsport. Then seek out and destroy the barb raiding parties. You will also preserve all magical assets, using them only when there is no other choice, that's including healing, and especially combat magic. Any questions?" "Yes, sir. Secure the area, call up the vets, warn the coastal areas, and go on a barb hunt. When will you be rejoining you command, sir?" asked Damien. "Pandarian and I are going to anchor down the flyer, then take the boundary route up the coast to Riversport. You won't be able to get anyone there in time, so we are going to do it. I will be sending the refugees to Codsport, so have the Reeve get his village ready to receive them," answered Grey. Opening the chest, Grey took out the intelligence report and handed it to Pandarian. "Here, Pandarian, go over this with Damien, work out the specifics for the next lant, and then come and find me. Damien, when you're done, brief your Marines and get the naval personnel twinned up with your more experienced Marines. It's going to take the better part of 2 hexels to get to the boundary region, so be ready by then. Handing the chest to Pandarian, he said, "Here, Pandarian, look after this for me if you would please. I suspect that I'm going to be busy later and I don't want to leave it behind in the rush," as he headed up to the outer stern deck of the flyer. By the time Gray had reached the outer stern deck, the flyer's deck crew had cleared all the wreckage from the upper decks and had finished rigging a makeshift foresail. Picking up the speaker tube, Gray called down to the helmsman to have him brace the wheel, waited for confirmation, and then began to slowly project the essence he had gathered earlier into the 2 sail wings and foresail. With the first touch of essence, the flyer's wing sails began their majestic circular up and down motion, and the foresail puff out as if it had been filled with wind. With barely a shiver, the flyer moved forward, gathering speed as it did so. Progress was slow, but it was steady. As they passed static pools of essence, Gray would reach out with his aura and gather more essence. The first naval command of Senior Tribune Sebastian Talanus Graylanus, proconsul to the Imperator, and Capitan of the INV Glorious Flyer, proceeded on course to the zone where the ethereal plane bordered the world plane. The progress of the barbarian dragon ship was slowed to almost a dead stop by the increasing density of the water's surface. By the second of night, the ship was surrounded by flotsam and jetsam, including numerous dead animals, both wild and domestic. Many were being attacked by various representatives of the nastier monsters, including a juvenile kraken. Throughout the night, the ship was constantly colliding with large objects, some living. At a little past the 4th of night, Gray had to resort to expending most of his stored essence to discourage another older kraken by casting a triad of fireballs past its beak and down its gullet. Then shortly thereafter, he used the last when he created a force blade to sever a tentacle the monster had wrapped around the mast, to prevent the dying creature from dragging the ship down with it. Ever resourceful, Darian worked with Tarula and another woman, and fried up some kraken calamari for an early breakfast. By dawn, Gray could see there were no humanoid bodies in the surrounding debris, which he took as a sign that the Marines had managed to evacuate the coastal areas. Darian was at the bow, pointing their course to avoid the larger chunks, allowing them to make better speed. He had just given the signal to hold course, then left the bow and got a long pole and hook. He put it out over the port side and corrected their course again to bring them closer to whatever he was after. A couple of ticks later, he stabbed out and hauled back in a bit of wet cloth which he handed off to one of the women, and then set the pole out again. He then gave another course correction, this time to starboard. He stabbed out again a tick later and hauled in a toy rocking horse, which he set down on the deck. He turned and smiled back at Gray, then replaced the pole on the deck and then resumed his bow watch. "Sometimes I wonder about him," Gray mumbled to himself. By late afternoon, the dragon ship entered the sheltered bay of Codsport. The people cleaning up the beach area saw the dragon ship and ran inland. Gray brought the ship to the centre of the bay and dropped anchor, and then had Pandarian run up the yellow flag of peace. Then they waited. Pandarian, Morella, Tarula, and several of the women joined Gray on the stern bench. The women were carrying 2 crates, a plank, and several covered dishes. Creating a table in front of Gray, they laid down a cloth over it and set out dishes and several covered platters. One of the women, who was introduced to him as Casella, told Gray that the women had gotten together and prepared this meal to thank him for all that he had done. Gray stood up and, with more grace and manners than he usually displayed, took her hand and kissed it, asking her to thank the other ladies not present for this grand courtesy. Casella blushed and curtsied, as did the other women one at a time before they left. He sat down again, and Pandarian, Morella joined him as Tarula served them before she too sat down. There was a lot of laughing and giggling from the other women on the ship as they ate. "You, sir, are a rogue," stated Morella with a laugh. With a completely straight face, Gray answered, "No, milady, I am a commando," finishing with a smile and a wink. Pandarian rolled his eyes and the 2 ladies laughed. Then Tarula said, "You may be a commando, but you are also a charming rogue." Conversion remained light during their meal, though a bit strained as they put the horror of what they had been through behind them. Given the meagre supplies we had with us, this meal is surprisingly good. How the women even managed to bake rolls and a fine pastry dessert is beyond me, marvelled Pandarian. They sat there for almost a hexal eating and talking, when a marine riding a horse arrived on the shore. While still mounted, he flag-signalled, "Who are you?" and Grey had Pandarian identify them. He turned and shouted back up the beach, and the villagers began to emerge from the wreckage on the beach above. There was very little damage. Most of the force of the waves must have been broken on the land surrounding the bay. Most of the homes further inland looked to be mostly intact. Some had completely escaped being damaged. Kellyan, the marine corporal who had signalled them, and 5 of the villagers rowed out in a fishing boat of some sort, and by way of a rope tied to the ship's bow, towed it to shore. Lady Morella and Tarula were warmly and respectfully greeted. The other women were also welcomed. News was exchanged. There was plenty of rejoicing, and some sorrow as well. Pandarian and I remained on the ship. I had him read the intelligence report again, and briefed him on my orders, but not my conclusion about the Imperial heir. He took it all in his stride. His only real comment was a whistle when I showed him the mithril coins in the chest. When he had finished reading, I took back the report, putting it back into the chest and handed it him, asking him to keep it safe again, and getting a "yes, sir" in return. Darien the Imperium is dead. There is no chain of command anymore, and the rules of conduct were always a waste of time between us. So what do you say that between the just 2 of us that we drop the old military rah-rah and become friends and partners? If I understand things, you are going to carry out your final orders, and to do so, you are going to need a military structure. You are going to be depending on me to see your orders are carried out. To do that, I have to remain in the chain of command. Sure, we can be more relaxed about it, but that military edge has to be there, or it's not going to work. I was hoping to establish a civilian command, but you are right. I never really understood the military process, having never really been involved in it. You know, I have mostly been a command of 1. You were the only other soldier I have ever worked with. Well, now you are at the top of the command pyramid, you are going to need a chief of staff, a staff, and troops for them to command. I would suggest we start with finding who and what we have available, and select a staff from among them. Then recruit the local retired legionnaire landholders, militia and auxiliaries, and form them up as reinforced mobile sentries. From there you can expand command and control to the surrounding areas, planned Pandarian. You should be the one in command. You have the knowledge and practical experience on how all this works. I am a lot better on the civilian, political, intelligence side than the military. Listen, Sebastian, you just described what any really good praetor does, and I did what any good chief of staff would do, lay out the options for their praetor to act on. Within the best commands, the commander and chief of staff are almost always friends, and the very best act as a partnership. So if I were you, praetor, I would assign me as your chief of staff and order me to get things rolling. With a laugh I said, "It is so ordered, chief, and thank you." Which brings me to the next question. What is your opinion of my assuming civilian authority too? In a word, don't. You are not interested in power for power's sake. I would advise that you let the people decide for themselves. Use your authority to establish military law during the emergency. Use that time to look for people you can use to establish an interim government, then let them determine the form of government. Keep veto power over the specifics so we don't get another Plantagenet, said Pandarian, offering his best advice. Interlude. Hall of Judgment. Right from the beginning, and for as long as I have known Carl Pandarian, when we were not engaged in activities specific to the mission, he would be reading military manuals, histories, commentaries, poetry, the myths, even the new stories. I never saw any point to it myself, but he seemed to enjoy it. When I would ask his opinion, he would give it to me. The advice was always good. Sometimes I would take it, and other times it would give me ideas of my own. It has just now occurred to me that his reading gave him a wide breadth of experiences that he could always apply when giving me advice. wrote Grey. Grey, looking over what he had written, remembered looking up the Plantagenet kings. The estate's library was huge, with over 25,000 titles. There were 27 titles that directly addressed the Plantagenet era alone. Case in point, the Plantagenet references. During the early history of the Valan people, when they were establishing dominance over the other clans, the last of the great chiefs became the first of our kings. From about 2154 to 2985 CE, the kings became more and more powerful, at the expense of the people. The clan chiefs were first among equals, then the great chiefs were first among the chiefs. The kings started out as first among the great chiefs. Great kings were first among kings. Towards the end of this period, there was just royalty, nobles, warriors, and thralls. The people had gone from being equals to slaves. The Plantagenet refers to a member of the royal family that ruled during that period. Grey wrote in case the judges did not know what a Plantagenet was. At the time, I had only a vague idea of what a Plantagenet was. It took many seasons for me to read the histories, and have Darian explain some of what I read in context of our situation. There are an amazing number of parallels between our current situation and the events of our early history that led to the Plantagenets, too many to detail here. But one example that caught my eye was that I was about to establish myself as the military ruler of these people, or in effect, clan chief. As any good leader, I will listen to what each has to say and balance that with the overall needs of everyone. In effect, the first among equals. Darian tells me that history is full of these repeating cycles of events. Time after time, the same sorts of things happen again and again. Philosophers argue that it is either a result of our basic nature, or a limitations of the gods unable to escape theirs. Grey stopped writing. The reason was that the three Lords of Judgment were arguing. Mulunu was stating her case to punish Grey for his insolence, while Coas was defending Grey on the grounds that because he did have that point of view in life, it was not insolence. Thus far, Sorkamore had not made a decision, and the other two were attempting to gain its support. Grey continued to watch for a while, then went back to recalling his life. On board the dragon ship in harbour at Codsport, Grey nodded and said, "Carl, I vaguely know what a Plantagenet is, some sort of overlord king, and you are right, we don't want that to happen. You are going to have to give me a briefing on that soon, but right now we have to get things rolling as you said. First, I'm going to need a situation briefing as soon as I hit the beach, so have Damien or Kellyan prepare one for me. Then while I am being briefed, I want you to organise the veterans in this village, send them out at the first of dawn tomorrow to recall the other veterans settled in this district, and to post notices calling for volunteers to establish an auxiliaries, or better yet, a militia. I will have more, once I get that briefing, invite Lady Morella, Lady Tarula, the village's senior elder, priest, arcanist, leader of the fishers and reeve to join us after I am finished. Yes, you will also want the leader of the veterans, I expect. No, I am going to keep the military and civilian aspects separate. I will be meeting with the veteran leadership and the Marines afterwards. I want to keep the appearance of the preeminence of civilian authority, so I will meet with the local leaders to get their opinion before I give the military their marching orders. Yes, that will be better in the long run, and it's best to establish procedures early. Anything else you need done before I go and kick butt? Yes, stand up and hold your arms out from your body. As he did as I requested, I gathered my will and took a pinch of the dirt, sand and salt that encrusted his uniform. Concentrating on the mana that permeated the filth on his uniform, I strengthened the attraction to the pinch that I had dropped to the deck. Slowly at first, the filth left the uniform and joined the pinch on the deck, as I increased the attraction while firmly holding the pinch to the deck. In a matter of a few ticks, Pandarian's uniform was clean, though wrinkled. There, now you can go ashore and kick butt. My deepest thanks, Bastian, this is so much better. Even the itching has stopped. With that and a laugh, Pandarian gathered up the chest, jumped from the deck into the knee-deep water, and walked onto the beach, calling out for Kellyan as he went. Some time later, Pandarian sent a villager to the ship to respectfully request the children's toys he had claimed from the sea. Apparently he had found their owners. As Grey was sitting between the rag doll and rocking horse, he handed them over to the man, who was grinning from ear to ear. With a full nod of his head and a "Thank you, my Lord Sebastian," the man returned to the beach.